Hello, everybody. Welcome to Reptile Rejects. Happy to have everybody on. Today it's going to be me and Michael will be off. I got our co host, Shan Melanson, that'll be jumping in. So we'll talk to Shan for about 2 or 3 minutes, then we'll bring Nick on. So, first of all, welcome, Shan. Thanks to pick up the slack for Mike. How are you?
Thanks, Dom. Appreciate it. Um, Happy to be on. Passionate about snakes since I was a teenager. I'm 51 now. Um, kind of let it go for a little bit when I had my kids. And I kind of got back into it in 2005. Started breeding some Brazil and rainbow boas. The last 10 to 15 years, I've been kind of refined it, kind of got into the carpet pythons when I met you and stuff like that.
Oh, very nice, very nice. Yeah, you've got a pretty insane collection. I think your collection is about twice the size of mine, but and you killed it this year. I know you got a lot of clutches. So both Shan and I are going to be hosting, and of course we've got the pretty much one of the bigger guys for carpet pythons. In our opinion, is probably the idol of many people. One of mine, one of Shan's. So we brought on Nick Mutton. Nick, thanks for coming on. How are you, man?
Good, good.
Thanks, Nick.
Nick, happy to have you on. So we're probably going to start a bit different. One of the ones, topic you've covered a long time ago that I've heard, but my first probably point that I'd like to go and hit on with you, and everybody kind of knows you, so I'm not going to ask you to tell your history or tell you all that kind of stuff. There's so many podcasts with that on. So one of the things that interests me is the evolution of pythons. I'd love to talk about where they came from and how mainly the whole Australian clade came about. And I know you're really good with going back with all that kind of stuff. So I'll give the mic to you.
Okay. Pythons are a pretty ancient lineage of basal snakes. Basal snakes are often defined as having the rudiments of a pelvis and a few other sort of primitive, i.e., basal morphological characteristics. We tend to, in the hobby especially, and even science to a lesser extent, they lump boas and pythons together as if they were similar. And they're really only similar in that they occupy the same sort of ecological niches in different parts of the world. Um, and we in the hobby, most people probably would assume that pythons are more ancient than boas because boas give live birth, and our own sort of bias as mammals and live bearing mammals ourselves is we think, well, eggs is primitive and live birth is somehow better or superior because that's what we do, which is not at all the case at all. But it turns out that pythons are actually much younger than boas. Boas are a vastly more ancient lineage. Boas go back to the late Cretaceous period, 80, 90 million years old. That's when boas. Pythons are only about half as old. Pythons don't evolve until about 45 million years ago in the Eocene. So they're actually the new kids on the block, relative to boas anyway. They're both very old lineages of snakes, but boas are the older one by almost twice as long. And egg laying, the difference between egg laying and live birth is boas, I mean, they're not like placental mammals or anything, but all live bearing animals effectively just are egg laying animals that retain the egg inside until it's time to go. That's basically what happens. It's just varying variations of that theme. So it's not really as high tech as you might think. It's not quite as advanced. It might be advantageous at times and disadvantageous at times. Pythons have egg laying can be viewed as a reproductive advantage at times because if you're a pregnant female boa, you can't stop being a pregnant female boa if that was slowing you down or causing you problems. You're kind of stuck. A gravid python or a python sitting on eggs could literally just abandon its eggs in a pinch and go eat or do what it needs to do and possibly survive. And there's tons of examples of pythons doing just that. And hell, if they leave, their eggs might even still hatch if it's late in the process. They could leave and they might still hatch even. But so depending on where you find them and what's going on in the ecosystem, egg laying versus live birth are pretty interchangeable. There's no advantage to one or the other. And in fact, in some lineages, in the sand boa lineage, and this gets a little bit wonky and a little bit beyond my understanding how you could determine this from just purely from genetics alone, but there's evidence, there's a paper published that showed that sand boas, which aren't really actually true boas anyway, they're old world Ericine snakes. The Ericinae is a family of ancient snakes that is not boas or pythons. They're yet another group of ancient snakes, but because they give live birth mostly, we lump them in with the boas. And there are New World and Old World. So your Old World Erisines are your sand boas, and your New World Erisinae are your rubber boas and rosy boas. But there's evidence for sand boas going back and forth from egg laying to live bearing multiple times, back and forth and back again, depending on what works. And in fact, you still see I think it's the Arabian sand boa, the one that looks very similar to a Kenyan sand boa, and it's clearly transitioning either from laying eggs to live birth or the other way around, because they lay an egg that's a sticky, wet egg that you can kind of see through, and it hatches in like 10 days because they're literally transitioning to or away from eggs or towards live birth or vice versa. So you see a living transitional form where that's in flux. So this is why people lump pythons in, thinking they're older than boas. They go back about 45 million years to the Eocene. There were originally, where pythons evolved was a big debate in the scientific community for a long time. There are still those people that debate that. The evidence is pretty solid now. You can pretty much conclude that it's probably a South Asian origin for pythons 45 million years ago. Could be Africa, could be a little higher, a little north, could be Eurasia, probably South Asia, for a whole host of reasons. And then from that point, pythons diversified into 3 radiations. There are 3 different radiations of pythons. There's the Afro-Asian radiation of pythons, which are all your African and mainland Asian species. You have your Australopapuan python radiation, which is everything east of the Wallace Line. So all of your New Guinea and Australian pythons, which has the most species richness. And there was also a European python radiation that is entirely extinct. So this is why there's an amazing fossil deposit. It's basically a volcanic lake where you have imagine a volcanic caldera, just like this lake full of water, but it's actually the cone of a ground level volcano with water in it. And every once in a while, this volcano burps up a big belch of toxic gas and literally nukes every living thing in the lake and around it. And everything dies and falls into the lake, gets buried in sediment, and is perfectly preserved. It's called the Messel Pit in Messel, Germany. And circa that, right around the dawn of pythons, that 42-ish million year mark, they found a pot in the exact same depositional layer from one of these events, which happened over and over and over again. A python and a boa, living together at the shore of a lake in Germany, of all places. So you don't think of German boas and pythons, but at this point, Europe was a collection of large islands that were much closer to the equator. And the Eocene period where all this is going on was a little bit warmer than it is today on average. So you had all sorts of European crocodilians and pythons and boas and all this kind of stuff. But so your climate changes, European pythons become extinct, leaves just the two lineages that we have now, and those lineages split 25 to 30 million years ago is this breakpoint between the Australopapuan python radiation and the Afro-Asian python radiation. As fanciers of carpet pythons and whatnot, we're more focused on the Australopapuan python radiation. That has by far the most species in it. And that goes back about 25 million years ago. When pythons first invade Australia, you're talking about 25 million years ago. Indonesia wasn't exactly where it was now. Everything's a little bit different, but it was still a series of islands that were subtropical. And so you have an island hopping. And you probably have just a single common ancestor for all this stuff. If you look at all the Australian pythons and the New Guinean pythons, you'll see a lot of commonality. And there's a concept in biology called ancestral state reconstruction, where if you look at all the descendants, all the living lineages of a thing, and you identify the common characteristics that they all share, you can be reasonably common that the last common ancestor of all those things had those traits, because that's more likely, more parsimonious, that they all inherited something from a common ancestor, rather they all evolved the same things independently is much less likely. And when you do that with the Australian and New Guinean pythons, you come up with a picture of a carpet python. You come with a picture of something that's probably 5, 6, 7 feet long, semi-arboreal, prehensile tail, a skull and crossbones head, and a double neck stripe. Look at a Cape York spotted python. What's it got? A skull and crossbones on its head and a double neck stripe. Oh, and the last common ancestors would have had red babies. Look at all the Australian pythons that have red babies. What are the odds that they all independently evolved red babies totally separately? And most of the scrub pythons and some of the lyaesis. That all these things just independently evolved a red baby. red babies. That's incredibly unlikely. It's that the last ancestor of all of them made red babies. And something anatomical like a prehensile tail is very difficult to evolve. That's a complicated, they have a literally grappling hook on your body. That's a pretty cool thing, pretty advantageous, probably pretty difficult to develop that. Much easier to lose. It's easier to lose something than it is to gain something. So when you look across all these pythons, you can be pretty confident that at 25 million years, when all these things split from each other, basically pythons make it over the hump into Australia, New Guinea, which is one landmass most of the time anyway. And also there's all these, instead of just tropical rainforest environments, you have a continental environment. You've got deserts, semi-deserts, scrublands, savanna, wet forest, monsoon forest. You have all these, and you have what's called in evolutionary biology an adaptive radiation. Organism gets there, and there's this explosion of diversity as they adapt to colonize and occupy all these niches. And that's why some become semi-desert fossorial specialists that eat reptiles, and that become your aspidites. The distance in evolutionary terms between a blackhead and a scrub python is the same as a scrub python is to a carpet python, is a carpet python. They're all the same. It all comes back to that same branch point, that common ancestor node. So you'll see, if you look at a chondro, you guys must keep chondros or at least have messed with them.
We're still trying to get some, but yeah.
Look at chondros, and you will often see the ancestral state in chondros. It's often black, and it's kind of reduced, and it turns blue when they get older, but you'll see evidence of that double neck stripe and that skull and crossbones on the head. It doesn't last, but you still see it. You see it in all the Antaresia. You see it in the Cymalia. What are the odds that all the Cymalia and all the carpets and all the chondros all evolved prehensile tails completely separately? No way. What's the closest relative of all the Australopapuan pythons? Retics. Retics are the closest. They're the closest non-Australopapuan python that they just didn't quite cross the Wallace line, but they get right up to it. And what are they? A semi-arboreal generalist with a prehensile tail. If I handed you a 6-foot retic and a 6-foot carpet python, you would be hard, and it blindfolded you, you'd be difficult. It'd be very difficult to determine what you're holding. The retic scales are slightly smoother, but you probably wouldn't be able to detect that just by hand. And what's a 6-foot retic doing? Exactly the same job as a 6-foot carpet python. That's your common ancestor, is something along those lines, something very similar to that. And even when you go back in Australia, there's the River Sleigh Formation. I think it's 14-ish million years old. Some pretty ancient bones, and they've got several python species, fossils that are from there. And some of them are so similar to carpet pythons that at various times, different researchers place them in the genus Moralia or even as Moralia spilota from all that time ago. Because you get back, that 6-foot arboreal prehensile tailed generalist is a really good way to make a living in a whole different variety, all kinds of habitats. So that's where your carpet pythons came from. And really the differences between them now are largely just made up by habitat. Local color changes to adapt to local conditions, or desert adaptations in the case of breadlie. And it's, but yeah, that's where pythons came from.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So I assume, I hear all the time, aspidites are the oldest pythons. I've heard that a million times, but then judging by what you're saying, they lost the heat pits if everybody else has heat pits, right? So they would be more of a newer.
They do have heat pits. They have one.
Oh.
They don't even lose it all. This is the thing. I'm actually in the process of writing an aspidites book with 3 co-authors right now. And I get to write all the evolutionary history stuff, because it's kind of what I find interesting anyway. But I did an osteological analysis of the skulls for the book, and I've got a 3-panel with high resolution 3 CT scans of the skull of a Burmese python is a pretty typical python skull, a black-headed python skull, and a blind snake skull. And the aspidites skull is closer to the blind snake than the Burmese python. Why? Because they burrow through sand. And honestly, why don't they have heat pits? Because having heat pits, if you eat mostly reptiles, is not that useful. And it becomes a liability if you're burrowing through the sand all the time, because going through life with a bunch of clogged up heat pits clogged with sand would suck. And they're not that useful to you, so they get scaled over and go away. Aspidites do have one rostral, the right of that lip scale, that triangular scale on the face. They actually have a heat pit in it. It's underneath the scale, so it's kind of scaled over. It's very thin, and it's sensitive. They have Aspidades have that really prominent overbite, so they kind of come over, so it's on the top jaw, so it's actually under here. But if you will, and I never noticed this, and I should have noticed this because I have frankly a shitload of Aspidades. But my good friend Scott Eiper in Australia pointed this out to me. He goes, "Yeah, you ever notice like when they're like when there'll be food around or whatever, they will like rear up and angle their head back like this. It's because the heat pit's underneath the top of their jaw, so that is useful." It's like, but in that configuration, mostly scaled over and underneath, it protects it. But it's not their primary use of how they get their food. So yeah, they are no more primitive than anything else. They're actually probably the most derived python, the most advanced python. They're not the most primitive. A lot of the damage and misconceptions that come from that was from in 1993, a taxonomist named Arnold Kluge wrote his masterpiece, The Phylogeny of the Pythonine Snakes. And everybody for a good decade thought this is the greatest. This was the definitive paper on pythons. This is the bee's knees. This is the shit. It's all wrong. It was based, there's no DNA use because of the time, it was 1993. It was all based on exhaustive morphological analysis. And the problem with morphological analysis is that it can't account for evolutionary convergence. Similar things, similar traits do not necessarily, but they might also not equate with shared ancestry. They might be just like a similar solution is evolved independently to solve the similar problem. And you can't say that out. So these primitive characteristics, seemingly primitive characteristics of blind snakes are truly primitive snakes. They're the most primitive snakes. These blind snake-like fossorial adaptations he interpreted incorrectly as being, these are just primitive pythons. And they just retain ancestral basal characteristics. In reality, they re-evolved those characteristics because that was what they were doing. And that made sense to exploit that niche. So because of the presence of Aspidades, he assumed that pythons evolved in Australia and then migrated out. And that's the exact, completely ass backwards. It's the opposite. They came in. In fact, almost nothing is native to Australia. Marsupials, most of the iconic reptile groups that you associate with Australia came in from Asia, right around the time the pythons did. Varanids, agamids, and pythons. Oh, and elapids. Elapids, that's most Australian reptiles. Agamids, elapids, pythons, all of those things colonized. There was things there already, obviously, but the newcomers just did better, and they displaced and replaced most of the native stuff. So, for example, there was an even more basal lineage of very primitive snakes that were huge also, that were living in Australia. These were really, really, really ancient. You're talking 150 million year old kind of ancient. They were the Madsoid snakes. Some of these things were fucking huge. These were like primitive. For a while, early on they thought they were pythons, but there's various osteological indicators they're not. They're their own separate family, the Matsoidae. But they were microstomatin snakes. Macrostomatin snakes means just macro, meaning it just means large mouth, meaning you can do the detach your jaw and eat big stuff. Blind snakes are microstomatins. They open their mouth as wide as they can, and that's it. The jaw doesn't do that. These were giant microstomatin snakes. Not very efficient. That being able to disconnect your jaw from your skull and split the right and the left side separately is a really cool trick. This is probably why they got replaced by pythons, because the dietary flexibility of a python that can eat not just something that it can swallow, but things that it frankly should have no business swallowing, that ability to have a much broader menu made them probably a bit more successful in my estimation. But the last one of these, the Madsoid snakes went extinct everywhere in the world except Australia, up until the terminal Pleistocene. So humans got to see these things in Australia. So they end up, the end Pleistocene mass extinction that took out all the other big cool animals in Australia and everywhere else in the world, took out the last of them. There was a species called Wanumbi naracutensis. And you're talking like an 18-foot basal snake with a pelvis and little rudimentary hind limbs that can't open a giant python-like snake that can't open its mouth very wide, that's 18 feet long, was still around up until the very end of the Pleistocene, before they finally went out. But there was an entire radiation of these snakes that were doing the python-like job in Australia when python showed up. It just seems that pythons seemingly did the job better and replaced them. And so the last of them went extinct. So, all right.
Oh, very
Here's
cool.
the taxonomic history lesson nobody asked for.
Uh, to me, a gigantic snake that only eats little things. Can you imagine the amount of small animals he would have to
I would
eat in
imagine
order
they need
to?
like pretty good sized stuff, but just not be able to like, you know, like if you had an 18-foot scrub python, it's eating wallabies and stuff. I mean, it's like you would have to eat. You would have to do one of two things. You'd have to eat a shitload of small things, or alternately, and we don't really have any way of knowing the metabolic rate of a fossil. That's pretty hard to figure out. I would suspect it's either you eat a lot of small stuff, or perhaps you're like a xenarthran. Xenarthrans are a family of mammals that there are a few around. Armadillos, some anteaters, sloths. These are xenarthrans. And what one of the telltale characteristics of xenarthran mammals is an absolutely rock bottom metabolic rate. Their metabolic rate is so unimaginably slow, which means you don't have to eat very much. Your body gets really good gas mileage. Your body temperature is lower. They're just doing it. They're not, but and in a reptile, you can imagine that perhaps these very large snakes were not eating as much as you think, but they just have incredibly low metabolisms, so they don't need to eat as often as you might expect. But that would lead to probably very, very extended lifespans, extended periods, a long time to grow, a long time to get to sexual maturity, and ultimately a longer lifespan. And you see that low metabolic rate leads to longer life expectancy in a lot of cases. Look at what's the longest lived vertebrate in the world? The Greenland shark. What's it doing? Sitting 1,000 feet underwater. That's just barely a half a degree above freezing, and it lives like 600 years because the metabolism is. And it ain't eating a lot. They eat, but they're not a ton of food down there. Yeah. They live this crazy long life because they're barely fucking moving, and they're barely above freezing, and everything is slowed down and it elongates lifespan. That's why you think
same thing
lives so long. Super low metabolic rate. Where I live,
same thing for mammals too, right? The longest lived mammal is what, a whale in the north as well.
The bowhead whale. 200 years for a mammal, but it's cryopreserved in a cold environment with a low metabolic rate. Where I live, you can catch rubber boas. Rubber boas are really cool. They spend 8 months out of 12 sleeping, and they come out, and it's like they're so slow. They give birth in the fall, and the babies just basically go into hibernation and don't eat their first meal until the following year. That's just what they do. They get up into Canada. You can get them in BC. Rubber boas a little bit. I'm actually only 2 hours south of BC my own self. But there is a researcher at, well, he used to be anyway, I'm not sure if he still is, at Central Washington University. It's kind of the rubber boa expert. And he thinks that rubber boas might live 100 years, that they might have like up to a century-long lifespan because their metabolic rate is so absurdly slow. But yeah, so this is, you might have a big snake that just doesn't eat a lot because its metabolic rate is so low, and that's the loophole. But you can see how something if it takes 15 years to get to maturity, it lives like 60 years and eats small stuff every once in a while, could get rapidly outcompeted by a python that can eat a much wider variety of food, has a much higher relative metabolic rate, is going to hit maturity way faster and produce way more offspring. And then you just flood the zone and outcompete, and then that's it. So.
Yeah, lose a couple adults, and then that species completely gone. Before we go into, I want to ask you some questions on the average. Just one more about evolution there. I always hear people talk about old world pythons and new world pythons. Do you mind going on, just letting us know the difference there?
Yeah, there's no such thing as a new world python. They don't exist.
So why do people call it like that? I've heard that before. I've heard that terminology a few times. Any idea?
What that refers to, probably the origin of that. People hear stuff, they half remember stuff, and they kind of go off half-cocked. You see this in all aspects of life and everything. You get a fragment of information, and they kind of just mentally fill in, oh, there's New World pythons. For a while, people referred to the Mexican burrowing python as the Mexican burrowing python or the New World python. It is not a python. It is a xenopeltid. It is the closest relative of pythons that isn't a python. So it's like the last stop on the python train, and everything after that, you have a branching event. This lineage splits, and it splits into two, goes like this, and one side becomes the Mexican burning python, and the other side becomes all the rest of the python, the proper pythons. So it is considered the sister lineage to all the pythons, but it is not a true python. That's probably where that comes from. So, and they're in Central America and Mexico. I thought about getting them. It's like the closest thing. So when you read any papers, any phylogenetic papers on pythons, they always show up because they're used as an outgroup a lot, because they're they're the closest thing that isn't a python to a python. But yeah, there are no New World pythons. There are a shitload of Old World boas and New World boas, but that's a different thing. But boas are so much older than pythons, which explains why they're all over the place. One thing that's fascinating, I know we're supposed to be talking about pythons, but I find immediately fascinating is like,
It's all good.
there are boas in places where there shouldn't be boas. And people don't realize, well, how do these boas get to New Guinea and Indonesia and all these places on the other side of the earth from South America? How the boas get there and get to Madagascar? And it's the boas never had to go anywhere. The boas have always been exactly where they were. All those land masses, if you roll the clock back to the Cretaceous when boas were around then, all those southern continents were part of Gondwana. You had a southern supercontinent. You had Pangaea, which splits north-south into Laurasia in the north and Gondwana in the south. Gondwana has more land mass, which is Africa, South America, Australia, Antarctica, and India, which is not hit Asia yet. It's its own separate landmass. And Madagascar is a fragment of Africa. All that shit is one landmass, and there's boas on all of it. And what happens is, at the end of that period of time, it starts breaking up and breaking up and breaking up and drifting and drifting and drifting and moving, and all these things start moving apart from each other. And the boas were always there. They just rode. They didn't go anywhere. The ground they were sitting on moved that far because that's how old boas are. They're just that old. There are no African pythons. There are no mainland African boas, but there's boas in Madagascar, and that's most easily explained by pythons. Pythons probably just outcompeted mainland boas. They're doing similar jobs, and the pythons probably had some edge, and they outcompeted them. But since the Madagascar boas were on this island that had sufficiently drifted offshore, no pythons made it. Boas continue. Same reason why you have marsupials in Australia. Why you also have lemurs in Madagascar. Lemurs are not true simians. They're considered prosimians. They're an early super primitive, almost a primate, but kind of quasi primate, because they've been there in isolation since before true primates even existed. They've just been out there just like a little Australia doing their own thing. And no other stuff made it out there to compete with them. So that's why you have boas in weird places. They just rode that land. Pythons aren't quite old enough to have done that. So, more questions nobody asked.
I love it.
All right.
Shan?
Hey, so big fan of your ivory project. Can you tell me how it all got started and basically what it takes to make this ivory project? The other thing is when do you start calling it like a certain percentage? And then the distribution, like where were you able to send this stuff to in Europe? If you can expand on that.
That's easy because that's a really short answer. The project started in 1994, so 31 years ago, when I was a very young hobbyist. I hatched in my very first year of breeding snakes. In my third clutch, my first year of trying to breed any pythons, I tried 4 female carpets and I got 4 clutches. I hatched a total of 63 babies and was woefully unprepared to be that. I figured, I thought, oh, this is going to be difficult, and I'll try all 4 of these pairs, and maybe if one pair goes, they'll be super stoked, and they all went. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get 63 snakes. In there was 2 clutches of jungles, and one was from the female was, I don't know, kind of ugly, I guess, by today's standards. I don't think there's any such thing as an ugly carpet python. I think people just have unrefined taste, I guess. I think they're all beautiful. It's all semantics, but I had this female where the male was really, really extremely yellow, almost orange. Really, really, even today would be considered a really nice looking jungle carpet. The female was much more subdued, just kind of very blah, washed out, but not like in a special, that's an awesome looking snake way. Just as like you know. But, you know, I was a hobbyist. I didn't know a whole lot. At that time, you got what you could get. I bred her, and she laid 6 enormous eggs. Not a small snake, but laid this 6 giant eggs. I think the other female must have laid like 13 or 14. So I hatched those 6 eggs out, and there was a weird baby in that very first clutch, that very first year. And this baby was obviously weird and kind of zebra-like, I guess. There's no zebras. It wasn't a zebra. This was decades before zebras, but it kind of had that very thin light pattern, sort of very squiggly and intricate, not unlike a zebra. Not the head pattern. It was weird looking. It was enough to notice that's weird. And then it did something strange. It shed when it was 5 or 6 days old. It shed. And then it shed a second time. So when the rest of the clutch was having its first shed, it shed its second time and never ate. But it was obviously weird looking. It was paler and different looking. But again, not like I didn't know what I was looking at. I mean, you're not expecting something weird to pop out in the first time you breed snakes. It turned out to be my first experience with a really, really, really unbelievably difficult starter. But I kept plugging away. I finally got that thing to eat. Its first unassisted meal, it was a fuzzy Russian dwarf hamster. That's what you know how hard it is to find a live, fuzzy Russian dwarf hamster? After that, I got it going. And then as it continued to grow and shed, it was very obviously not normal. All of its siblings looked a lot like dad, got a fair amount of yellow, pretty normal, what you'd expect. And then this one just stayed pretty pale, pretty creamy, whitish, kind of, not like a refined ivory now, but like obviously weird, obviously stuck out like a sore thumb. I sold the rest. I kept that one. And then I sold it to Ryan Young because my dream snake was a Brettles python, and I've been lusting after those forever. And this was here in the 90s. That shit was expensive. I wanted to get 2 pairs of Brettles pythons from Doug Price. The going rate for Brettles pythons for 2.2 was $10,000. Not $10,000 $25. $10,000 $1998 for my broke ass, working a shitty job as a hobbyist. That was an insurmountable. I got a little lucky in that Doug wanted a Bowen's python that a friend of mine had, that a friend of mine was importing stuff from Indonesia, and he wanted this young female Bowen's python, and he was willing to trade my friend these 2 pairs of Brettles pythons to get this Bowen's python, which was a lopsided deal because Bowen's pythons are only like $800. So my friend was like, "Look, I'll give it to you. I don't have this much into it," and he haggled a price. I ended up getting the Brettles pythons for a ridiculously good deal for me. I need to raise the money, so I sold that snake to Ryan Young. And but Ryan at that time lived in the same town. He's still only like 45 minutes away, and he went about setting out to find a black and white male, and it took a few males before he found one that was pretty. I mean, I wish we still had that one. It was pretty freaking nice. And he produced the first clutch of actual ivories. I produced the first individual. Ryan found a male, made a clutch of them. He sold most of those to a guy named Matt Turner. Matt nothing came of that, but he kept a few back. Ultimately, a couple years later, I got bought the whole project back from Ryan. And then, I don't know if you count the first spontaneous one as a generation or not. Then Ryan's in there for 2 generations. Then I get the whole project back, and I produce like the last 6 generations. And that's where it came from. And it's one of those things that people ooh and they ah, and then the number one thing, what morph is this? Is it Kodam? It's like, and then you're like, you just the eye roll. I mean, it's like, there's no such thing as Kodam. If anybody says Kodam, it's going to be you're just like. I feel like that Ben Affleck meme where he's outside smoking. Does that look in his face like fuck? There's no such thing as Kodam, and it's none of that. It's just, I think people are I know that modern herpers they're just spoiled. Everything must be a morph. Morphs are the only reason that anything exists. Why would you exist? Why would you even bother to get out of bed every morning if you weren't a morph? Why produce snakes if they're not morphs? What's the point of existing if it's not for morphs? It's like that mindset of morphs are the only thing that matters. That sort of tunnel vision. the idea that you could make effectively an exanthic jungle carpet that is way wider than a literal exanthic jungle carpet just by selectively breeding generation after generation after generation after generation for 30 years, you could make something more extreme without a morph. They just can't. It doesn't even compute. But it's just tenacity. I'm super old. We're the same age. I'm 52, so we're old Gen X guys.
We are.
Right? Which
We
is
are.
awesome because that means we had awesome childhoods and we've maintained the ability to communicate with people person to person. We can
Absolutely.
we can hold a conversation, talk on the phone. Like it's
Yes. I'm actually tech savvy. Not very good with the tech savvy stuff, so
no, me neither.
I'm
I'm like
really old school, right?
right behind me. I'm in my. I needed to expand my baby room. I added another one, so I have like I have a baby room, a yearling and holdback room, and an adult room, and they're all in different buildings. But that meant my office, which I'm sitting in now, had to become baby room for my 2024 babies. And if you look on there, there's color-coded paper labels that I write on with a pen. No QR codes. I ain't scanning shit. I'm gonna write on that thing with a pen, like an adult. I am pen and paper. I am completely analog. I know how to do enough technological stuff to just barely do what I can need to do and nothing extra. If you ask, like I have 2 spreadsheets. I keep the best records in the hobby. I know every baby I produce with a picture. It's tied to its ancestry records, a record of who I sold it to and how to contact them, and when I sold them. I can tell you where exactly who. I can tell you the street address I shipped a snake to 15 years ago and what his grandparents were, without any exceptions. But this is how technologically not savvy I am. My spreadsheets are one that I imported a shipment from Paul, and he sent me a spreadsheet with all the who's getting what and all that. I just took that and deleted all the information. I've been using the same spreadsheet that Paul sent me that he set up because I don't know how to set it up. Every once in a while, it makes weird calculations because I don't know how to change that. So if you get far enough out, it does weird stuff off to the right. I don't understand it. I'm just using that because I don't even know how to set up a spreadsheet. I am completely like, if I can put something in italics or change it to bold font, I'm doing good. That's about the extent of my ability. I don't know how to use my camera very well. I don't have time for that.
This is my first time doing this, so hey.
Right?
You should have seen how worried he was about trying to do it. He was all like, how the heck do I turn this on? How do I do this? I'm like, you're going to be fine. Just press the button,
Right?
join, and you'll be good. You'll be good. Nick, if we can go back to the Ivory Project, going from generation 3 to 6, what I'm curious about is when you're breeding these snakes, are you doing 1 pair? Are you doing 2 pair? How many holdbacks? And what the heck do you do if all the animals that aren't refined to the white, right? Because I imagine you went from beige to slowly wider and wider and wider and kept refining, right? But where the heck did all the animals that weren't quite that white go? Did you let them go? Did you just hold it all back and only, like, I'm just curious as to how it got there because it's such a long.
All this time, I bet you I haven't sold more than 100 ivories in the entire 30 years. I don't think, I'd have to check. I actually know there was a year I had 2 clutches, but they weren't like really awesome ivories. I wanted the zebra gene. I wanted to make an actual zebra because a zebra is a black and white banded horse. I wanted to make a zebra that looked like a zebra, it's black and white. But inconveniently, it's not in there. And what the problem you got is that if you add unrelated blood in, you're not getting like 100% unrelated genes. You're getting like a fraction of 1% new genes, but you're undoing 15 years of selective breeding. You set the clock back 50% for this many new genes. I wanted that zebra allele. The original zebras that came into the United States, I was kind of a bit forward-looking and maybe a jerk. I don't know. It depends on your perspective. In Europe, they had a lot of jungle bloodlines that were not related to anything in the United States, but Paul also had U.S. line jungles he had brought over way back in the day. So he had zebras that were pretty decent yellow on them, and he had zebras that were, frankly, a lot less yellow, olive green, kind of ugly by most people's standards. But since I was the one doing the import and I was in control of who saw what pictures, I just wouldn't let anybody get the nice ones. It's like, here's the zebras that are available. And they were only allowed to pick from the ones that were 100% unrelated to every jungle in the United States. The reason is because we need new blood. And if I allowed them to pick, they would all pick the brighter yellow ones, and you wouldn't have had as much of the effect that I wanted. I knew that all these male zebras, they were going to screw these male zebras to every jungle they could possibly find as fast as they could, as many females as they could. And by doing so with these unrelated ones, they would also be reseeding the gene pool of jungle carpets with new blood, purely from greed, but they'd had no choice. So I didn't allow anybody to get the ones that were more yellow, and I didn't either. So it turns out those ones, one generation of breeding an olive green zebra to a yellow jungle made yellow zebras. Just one, they were on the cusp. They weren't quite there. So I made nice yellow zebras the first time out, and I still had my original couple that were really olive green and didn't have a yellow scale on them. So I used that to breed into the ivories because my goal was like, I'm going to get the genetic benefit of how I'm going to get the zebra gene. I'm going to get the outcrossing benefit, and I'm not really adding very much yellow back into the mix that I then have to remove later. So maximum benefit for minimum setback in terms of the white. And I made a couple clutches of 50% ivory zebras, and I held back a shitload of them, almost all of them. And in those, any baby will take after one parent more than the other, depending on what alleles they inherit. Some of them were creamy. They were decent. They weren't like, for what the parents were, it was like, okay, that's the best. Some of them I sold quietly at the reptile expos because they didn't look like much to people that just wanted a pet carpet and were never going to breed them. And I kept the best ones from those clutches. I raised them up, and then I bred them back to full-blooded ivory males. I held back mostly females. And then at 75%, you just made something that just looked like an ivory, but it had the zebra gene. The ones I posted the other day, they're 88% ivory blood, and they're as white as anything. But that clutch, there were 9 eggs. I have all 9 of them. One of them sitting right behind me. I have all 9 of them still. Like, I didn't sell any of them. And most of this project has been that. I make one clutch. I keep the entire flipping clutch. And then you see, boy, 2 years later, you'll have a real good idea who the best one was. If you know with carpets, like, how many times you sold a carpet and they're like, fuck, I shouldn't have sold that. You see it 6 months later and you realize that it's way better than the one you held back. But if you don't sell any of them, then whatever the best one is, you still have it. Then you end up with like the best of the best and the kind of eh. And if you're willing to just take the hit and not sell them for very much or just quietly sell them to people as pets or what have you, that's what happens. So I've done that a lot over the years. That's why I'm not maybe 100 ever, that 30 years, which is nothing, which is why that the first year that anybody other than me on the planet, basically, other than maybe Paul, and certainly the United States, has ever made a proper ivory was this year. 2025, 30 years later, Brandon Wheeler bred some snakes he got for me I gave him pick of the litter. He's a good friend of mine. I gave him pick of the litter from a clutch like 5 years ago, and he bred them. He's the first person to actually breed proper ivories other than me ever. It's ridiculous. It doesn't even make sense. How can that possibly be? Did you?
Yes.
In Canada?
Yes.
You got some from Paul?
75. So they're 2021s. I have a male regular jungle ivory, 75%, and a zebra female, 75%. It's the only ones he had on the list. I tell you, man.
The 2025 babies you made?
No. Yes, I just had them this year. The clutch kind of went wonky. I feel like a newbie. But anyway, out of 8 eggs, I had 3. 2 male zebras and 1 regular jungle female out of it. One of the zebra looks white, really pretty white compared to the other one.
Keep all 3 of them back and see how it goes. Try again next year with the parents.
Okay.
People don't realize, like, there's, to a large extent, like, if you breed, like, it depends on how these alleles come together. Let's make it a binary thing for selective breeding. It's not really, but for the sake of conversation, it makes it easier to, as I'll explain the tiger phenotype to people. Let's say that there's 10 genes that either code for yellow or white. There's no genes that code for white. White is not a pigment. It's the absence of a pigment. But let's just say that white is a thing that you can code for, and yellow is a coded thing. Imagine those 10 genes like they're light switches on a wall. If they're switching the up position, it's yellow. If they are switching the down position, off position, they are white. and there's 10 of them. If you take two animals that have, in your case, 75% ivory, let's say they have 7 genes turned off for white, 3 genes turned on for yellow. When you breed them together, the average baby will have 7 off and 3 on. But you'll get babies that have like 6 on, and you'll get a couple babies that might have 9 or even all of them turned off. So there will always, you will have the potential for babies that exceed both parents in that metric. It's also why, like with tiger coastals, if you have genes that are either code for bands or they code for stripes, up for bands and down for stripes. If you breed animals that are like, both 5s, they're kind of half-ass stripes, you'll get babies that are completely banded and way better striped than parents, and the average one will be like the parents, but you'll get above and below, and you just keep going and going and going for 30 years, and you end up with a white snake at the end. It's all it is. You just got to be patient. There is literally, I don't think there's anything you could not make from selective breeding. Sitting around waiting for a morph to come along is no fun and never happens. It's like you can, if you want to, I have tiger Darwins. I made pure Darwin tigers that are just as striped as anybody's tiger coastals. And it took me 2 generations. You can't stick it out for 2 generations. It's not that difficult to do. Carpets are generally very amenable to striping. So if you start putting positive selection pressure for striping, it goes really fast because it's kind of bubbling under the surface in a lot of these things anyway. The reason they're banded, when you see aberrant pattern carpets, is because they got some stripy alleles in there, and that's the interplay between bands and stripes ends up with this kind of aberrant thing. So it doesn't take long at all if you pick your pairings intelligently to make striped animals. So there's really nothing. I mean, but if you look at what I was able to do with the ivories to make a white jungle carpet, think of all the untapped potential in carpets. Look at inland carpets. Could you imagine if somebody sat there for 30 years and their only goal was to make the bluest inland carpet? Could you imagine in 30 years you would have a freaking blueberry colored freaking snake? You would, because they have just as much potential. They probably have more potential for blue than a jungle carpet has to be white. White isn't even a color. It's the absence of color. I'm trying to remove something that's damn well supposed to be there. All these things have, if you look at, there's 2 types of inland carpets that might be worthy of being separate subspecies, frankly, but inland should be a full species, possibly with a subspecies. If you look at the northernmost population that inhabits the lake air drainage basin that's separate from the Murray-Darling drainage basin animals, they get very close. One's kind of on top of each other, but they're genetically a little different. They're phenotypically a little bit different. You kind of lump them together as inlands, but if you look at some of those lake air drainage basin inland carpets, they'll, from around like Longreach, Queensland, they're like freaking like powder blue and pink or orange. Like pink blotches on the sides on a blue snake. It is insane. And nature did that. Like there's no reason you couldn't make pink and blue inland carpets with selective breeding. It would not be, the genes are already there. You just need to work it. So anything's possible. People just need to pick a direction and go with it. And the problem, I think, is people don't want to put in the work. They don't want to hold back whole clutches for endless generations, because that's how you get there with some of that stuff. Because these coloration pattern, if you're striping is easy because you can, the second they crawl out of the egg, you know what the best stripe is right away. But if a snake's going to turn out white or if it's going to turn out blue, you got to wait till they're damn near an adult to even know that. And if you pick you're never going to achieve that kind of result if I'm going to keep this my whole back pair for a color metric, because the odds that you happen to pick the best pair are fleeting at best. You probably didn't, because you can't know. Pattern is easy. Color is harder. You just got to hold them all back. But anything is possible. You can absolutely do it. But I think people are just spoiled. They want instant results. They don't want to you can make whatever you want, but it might take you 30 years. You got to hold back 12 entire clutches over 30 years and raise a bunch of snakes and never breed them. It's like and then I get people like, I have 1 ivory zebra left. Like there's 13 of them this year, same pairing as the year before. I just sold all this year's clutch, and the last one will be gone any minute, any moment now. But I get people who are like astounded that they're not cheaper, like all this like 30 years of selective breeding and all of that is worth nothing. Like, it's like you get that, like, well, I can get a jungle from so-and-so for $300. I'm like, well, then go buy it from so and so. I don't care. like, go do it. You find somebody selling you a pure white jungle carpet for $300, let me know. I'll buy all the rest of them. Like, you're not gonna get that. My time has to be worth something. I don't give a crap. Like, I'm like, my attitude with those things is, this is what I want for them, and I don't even care if you buy them. I literally do not care. You know what's gonna happen? The one that's sitting behind me is gonna shed again, and it's gonna be whiter. Then it's gonna shed again, and it's gonna be whiter. Then it's gonna shed again, it's gonna be whiter and bigger, and it's a female. It's like someone's gonna buy that snake, and if they don't, I'm happy to keep it. I don't even give a damn. I'm like, that's what I want. My time, your time's got to be worth something. Can you imagine putting 30 years into something, and then people want to argue with you about the price? Like you're trying to ask too much for something. It's like, I'm not asking enough. If you factor in what I'm like, you crazy? Like,
I totally agree. I mean, people don't realize how much work you've put into that. And like you said, you're keeping this one back and then breeding it and have to wait a whole till they reach maturity, sexual maturity, right? It could take a long time.
well, that's
Um,
another. I mean, this is a broader sort of discussion of things that like these like topics that like old timers know, but people listening to this podcast don't know mostly, unless they're old timers listening. And this is a bitter truth that if you stick with this hobby long enough, you'll eventually figure out, but people don't ever talk about. And it just comes down to this. The reality is of breeding pythons that with two exceptions, if a female python lays 3 clutches of eggs in its entire lifetime, that is realistically all you can ever hope for. If you get 4, you are on borrowed time. If you get 5, hats off. Like that's just it. You got to think like, oh, the snake had produced 50 offspring, and over the course of 3 clutches, it's done. You don't get. They think like, oh, I can do this or that. I'll breed them again next year. It's like you probably won't. You have to assume that every clutch is the only clutch, because that 3 clutches, that's an average. Yeah, there might be the ones that lay 4, hell, even 5. The original founder female, not ivory, but Hypo Brettles is still alive and is just laid a 7th clutch. Now, fecundity and
Crazy.
fertility are going down this year. But you know what? Do you know how many females? You can't even imagine how many females I've got and have had over the years that laid 0 clutches. Like 0. They got to 5 years old, never laid a clutch, dropped dead for no damn reason at all, or they just never bred. I've got a pair of jet black not jet black, but damn near jet black melanistic jungles from Paul's Melanistic, best 2 he ever produced. They're 11 years old and haven't done a damn thing. Haven't even locked up, nothing. I'm starting to lose patience. Like, are you kidding me? I've tried for 7 or 8 consecutive years, and I know how to breed jungle carpets. Male, you can pop him during the breeding season, giant engorged hemipenes, big sperm plugs. He just will not breed. Total dud. There's no point, and he's really black. So those ones never breed. I paid $15,000 for a trio of albino olive pythons. Guess how many eggs the 2 female albinos have laid?
Didn't you finally just hit it now?
I did, because I bred the albino male back to a het female I produced
Oh.
8 years earlier. The male will breed a little, but those females have never laid a single egg, and they're 13 years old. 13 years old, producing big follicles since they were 2.5 years old, and they just reabsorb them every damned year. So when you factor in the ones that drop dead, die young, get to maturity, crap the bed, die, get egg bound, or never produce anything at all, you get a couple of clutches out of a female python, and that's it on average. So these are, I mean, there's a reason why some things are hard to find. If every ivory I had ever produced just kept cranking out clutch after clutch after clutch, they'd be $100. But they don't do that. You get a clutch or two. The female I bred this year, that was her 2nd clutch. I will try again. If I am lucky and get another clutch, that's probably it. Realistically, I'd be shocked. I'll be super happy if I get the 3rd clutch. Super happy. But, and even make it worse, when they slug out, that counts too. Like, that counts against your total. It's like, the only exception to this rule, really, in principle, are ball pythons and Antaresia, which just breed every freaking year. I've seen ball pythons lay 20 consecutive years. I've seen Antaresia lay 15, 18 years in a row. I had a Simpson's python. I retired her after 12 consecutive clutches because I had enough of her offspring. I just didn't need to breed her anymore. She was a weird one. Only laid females mostly. I think she only ever produced in 12 clutches. Of every clutch was an average of 12 eggs. The lowest was like 11. The highest was 13. And I think she was 12 or 13 years in a row. And in that entire time, there were 7 males, including a 4-year stretch of all female clutches that just, for whatever reason, were always girls. And they
Were
did
they part though?
up. My current breeder, Eastern Simpson, is one of those from an all-female clutch from years earlier. And it breeds all the time. It's bred like 5 years in a row. Don't know. But if you look at that, though, that makes sense because do you guys familiar with what tropic levels are? Tropic level, for people who aren't familiar with that term, every ecosystem, you've got different what are called tropic levels. If like you look at an ecosystem in the animals and plants, it's kind of a pyramid with an apex predator sitting at the top of that pyramid, and then what it's eating and what they're eating and what they're eating, it gets down to plants and bugs and all this stuff towards the bottom. The higher tropic level a predator is, you see a couple things always happen. And the number one thing is the closer you get to being the apex predator, your reproductive rate has to, by necessity, go down because you'd overpopulate and out eat yourself. You can't have a great white shark that matures at 2.5 years and cranks out a shitload of babies every single year. You overpopulate, you outstrip your food supply. So, which is why great white sharks are like 20 years old before they hit the sexual maturity. They live like 70 years, and they're like 20 years old before they get to sexual maturity. They don't reproduce that much because they're at the top of that marine ecosystem. Pythons, as adults, a lot of them are an apex predator. And what eats adult pythons? Almost nothing eats adult pythons, most of them. The exceptions to that are the smaller species like Antaresia, which never achieve that. They get eaten by other pythons. Even as adults, they go back into the ecosystem as food. And ball pythons get eaten by other things. They never achieve apex predator status. Rock pythons are the apex predator python, not a ball python. So these pythons that reproduce year after year after year after year after year, just constantly, they're geared to do that physiologically because adults quite frequently get eaten themselves. So it's like you flood the zone with as many babies as you can because your babies and even your breeding adults go back into that food chain. An adult Brettles python has no known predators. We don't know of a single thing that eats adult Brettles pythons. Nothing. There's no recorded predators that eat them. If they get a big 8-foot Brettles python, nothing eats them. I mean, in theory, a wedge-tailed eagle could eat a Brettles python, but if a 7-8-foot Brettles python, and I've seen wedge-tailed eagles munching on dead roadkill kangaroos in the outback, and I don't know who wins that fight because I don't know if they'd mess with them. They could conceivably kill and consume one, but the odds are just as likely that Brettles python would strangle the eagle. So they don't have, and so what happens? Oh, well, they don't mature until they're 5 years old. Later on, so the sexual maturity, long lifespan, less reproduction over time because you're the top dog. So keep all your ivory babies. You don't know if you're going to get another clutch. That's the moral of the story. It's like keep everything back. Eventually,
Absolutely.
A few generations are going to go by, and when you've got everything you want, and you know, okay, I got 5.5, and they're all doing great, then maybe there's something for somebody else. Maybe not. Fuck them. Like, you can pay yourself first. It's like, if they're that rare in Canada. I don't know.
I don't think there's any in Canada right now.
They're just Spilota. And since Spilota is not endemic to Australia and Fish and Wildlife recognize they occur in New Guinea and you can legally trade them, that just Spilota would be possible to send to Canada. It's more the agonizing wait. Most people that send stuff up, they fudge the paperwork. They apply for re-export of something. They act like, oh, this thing I imported over here on this paperwork years ago. I'm just re-exporting because that's a shortcut. It's also not legal. I have to do this the right way. So I have to apply for captive bred CITES, and I have to prevent this whole fucking dossier of evidence that it's all legit and above board with all this paper trail. And then they sit on somebody's desk for 8 months and nobody looks at it and ignores it. And then 8 months later, they blow the dust off of it. Well, I've been feeding this stuff this whole time. And then they consider whether they would maybe consider giving me the permits, and maybe they do, and maybe they don't for no good reason. But they keep your money anyway, and if they do, then it costs a shitload of money to send them up between the freight and all the permits and all that. Canada was the easiest country I ever exported to. The Canadian government does not make things unnecessarily difficult on your side. Like Germany makes shit difficult on both sides. Canada was like, yeah, we don't care. It's not like it's going to colonize Canada. Canada was the least problematic country I've ever dealt with. it's the U.S. government. But when I did it with Canada, there was Brettles pythons, which are an endemic, and they scrutinize that stuff a lot more closely. So just doing Spilota, it's definitely possible, but it's like, is it economically worthwhile?
Yeah.
To have to feed snakes for a half a year or more. I've waited as long as 11 months to get told no for no reason. I wanted to export albino olive pythons to Europe. And 11 and a half months of waiting, all the proper documents and everything in. They send me a letter, says, no, fuck off, we're not giving you permits. We're keeping your money, though. We're not giving you permits because our team of people that investigate this stuff can't determine if giving you the permits would be detrimental to the wild population. To which I said, like, of albino olive pythons, they are literally albinos. They're obviously captive bred. There is no wild, well, that's just what we found, fuck off. That was the government's response. It's like, it's like that. It's maddening.
So for the exports in Canada, it really isn't that bad. One, it's free to apply. It's free to do it all. It takes about 3.5 weeks to get my permits because I ship out all Morelias, all my Morelias I sell. Both Shan and I sell them to Japan. So we need to apply for the CITES Appendix 2, and it takes about 3 weeks. The longest it took 1 year was about 7 weeks. And it's always gotten approved. The only thing I got back is once was like an explanation of why are the lineage charts the same for this male and this female? And I'm like, well, they're brothers and sisters, which they're siblings. And it's just easier when things are siblings. You've got less lineage charts. So it's just easier to prove the... But anyway, it wasn't that hard.
Yeah, it's ridiculous with some of this. I used to not know a guy, but I had a question I had to call and actually talk to a real human who was one of the people in charge of issuing permits. And he's like, he told me, like, yeah, half these people, they're just government employees who don't care about doing their job. He goes, if you got any anywhere permits, just put my name on it. So I put attention Gary, and I forget what his last name was. And for a few years there, like, everything, it was like 3-4 weeks permits. He didn't bend the rules. He just, like, when it came in, he opened it and just did the job and sent it out in a timely manner. The problem with it, the delay, is not because they're poring over it with some scientists analyzing. It's because it's just sitting on somebody's desk. The time it took 11 and a half months and they declined to give me the permits of the olive pythons, you get a letter, an email from them when they start processing it. And that's how long it sat there for almost an entire year, and nobody even opened it for almost a year to then tell me to get fucked. It was absolutely ridiculous. And that's so.
How about shipping to Europe? Do you have any issues moving things to Europe?
I've sent to Europe a couple times. I've only ever sent stuff to Paul.
Yeah.
So
you still have a problem with that? Is it still difficult?
I don't want to do it. It's such a huge pain in the ass. And the odds that they're going to say no on this or that thing for no particularly good reason, they've gotten increasingly more difficult to export endemic Australian species. And since a lot of what I do is Brettles pythons, I don't even want to bother. I don't want to be feeding animals for 6 or 8 months to get told no. This is how, okay, I exported rough scale pythons to Paul. And it took forever because they just couldn't believe that I had legal capture-bred rough scale pythons with a legal paper trail. And I did. Ultimately, they gave me the permits. And I sent Paul his rough scales. That's where Paul's roughies came from. I sent them to him. And then I know another person, like, they literally, then after that, another person I know tried to export catch-bred roughies, and they told him no. Same paper trail. And they told me no on the albino olive pythons. I'm like, you literally, it's the same paperwork. The albino olives, the roughies, and the albino Darwins came from the Australian Reptile Park to a private zoo in Europe and to the United States. It's the same paper in the same box the whole time. But now we've changed our minds. They said, yeah, we probably shouldn't have given you the paperwork for the rough scale pythons either. It's like, what? Like, I just don't want to get out of my skis. A bunch of money invested, an endless amount of time to get told no for because somebody just had a bug up their ass that day, and it seems like it's one of those things. Just Spilota probably would be doable, but any of the other stuff is probably... But it's expensive. Like I said, it was like $1,800 to Canada, and that was less. It's $1,000 more when I sent to Europe.
And that's just shipping and freight or in permits?
Yeah, that's not the animals. That's just a shipping and freight. Like, I just sent Paul a bunch of stuff, like, because I didn't want to have it in the United States. I didn't want to sell. I held back to figure out how the hypo bredels actually worked. It was difficult. I produced an outcross clutch of hypos, bred the original hypo male to an unrelated Lazic line female, and I raised 14 animals. The entire clutch, didn't sell a single one of their het for stripe. I raised all of them for 7 years until they were big adults and tracked their color progression. Because if you looked at them as babies, and even at 6 months, you had gotten the wrong idea. So I raised them to adults. I also had 2 clutches of second generation animals that I raised up for 2 years, like 30-something snakes, to figure this out conclusively. But I didn't want to breed that many hypo het stripes at all. So I just sent half of them to Paul. Just, here, I don't care about, have them in Europe. That doesn't affect my market. Like, they're not coming back. Like, so whatever. I traded them to Paul for some stuff that I didn't have. But yeah, so it might not be possible. It might be possible, but it would have to be sufficient enough to make it worthwhile. So let's see what happens in 2026 if I hatch some more. But,
for us, everything that's in Canada is derived from either Paul or some from Star Python. That's the only way. Like, there's almost nothing from the States because it just seems to be that closed gate. There used to be, because I know Don Patterson used to get a lot of stuff from Casey Lazic and like a couple things. But in the past, I'd say 8 or 9 years, I don't think anything Australian has really crossed that border. It seems that it's been almost completely jammed. Really,
the Fish and Wildlife has confiscated things, and they've got to bug up their ass over any endemic Australian species.
Yeah. Well, next time, if ever you send anything more to Paul, send him a couple of like 100% ivories, and just say they're already sold. We'll buy them
I will buy them. I will give you my right arm. I'm telling you right now.
It's such a pain. I don't even like.
I know.
Every week I have somebody in Europe, and it's like, "Hey, can you send for the ham show?" Like, no, I'm not even interested in trying to do that. I don't know. We'll see if I hatch some. I don't know.
So literally, if we could from United States to Canada to export and import back and forth, we would do really well here. Like, if I was able to get your stuff over here, like, people would buy it, like, no problems, right?
Yeah. I don't know.
Anyway, just saying that because I'm pretty sure the stuff from Don, the Brettles genetic stripe that I have, probably came from you originally.
I don't know. I'm
not positive about that, but
I have not made a normal genetic stripe Brettles in quite a long time. We're talking probably, and I don't think I ever sent any to Canada. It doesn't mean the animals I produce haven't made their way one way or the other to Canada, but I've not actually. I don't think. It's been so long since I did that Canadian shipment. I mean, I've got paper on it somewhere in my disorganized office. I have the documents scanned somewhere, but I don't remember if there's any. I don't know if there's any striped Brettles on there or not. I know there's one male hypo out of my very first clutch. Of them, been from 2013 or something. Yeah, no. It might be possible. I don't know if it's worthwhile doing. We'll see what I hatch this year.
Well, you'd be competing directly with all of Paul's stock and pretty much us. But pardon me?
Paul's a good friend, and I'll be respectful of that. Paul does himself a big disservice in that he is such a shy. You ever talk to him?
I did a couple times, yeah.
On the phone?
Yeah, me too.
Once, I think, on the phone.
It's hard. He's a fucking recluse. He doesn't promote himself. He's not media savvy. He's the opposite of that. And he's such a shy, quiet guy that I think people don't really realize he kind of goes under the radar in a lot of cases. And I'm super not shy, and I'm definitely out there. So a lot of people on the carpet side of things, I guess, know who I am, but they don't realize, I am in love. My friendship with Paul over the last 20 years is a huge part of why I have what I have, breed what I breed, and know what I know. The wisdom that Paul has shared with me, animals I've gotten from him over the years, that relationship has done a tremendous amount for me. And so I've got to give credit where credit's due. People oftentimes, people would kind of refer to me like I'm some sort of the OG. It's no, Paul's the freaking man. I'm just Who proved out those zebras? Oh, that was Paul. Where did my inlands come from? Oh, that was Paul. Where did I get? It's all Paul. Like, it's like I'm not. There's very little that's me. I mean, I might take something and selectively breed or produce this or that or do whatever with it, but a lot of the seed stock, a lot of it goes back to Paul. I would say probably at least 50-60% of all the carpets in my collection trace back in whole or in part to something I got from Paul at some point. Maybe quite a long time ago, but it's that influential. So, yeah, I'm not. Paul's the man. If only he would do podcasts or something. Like, he just.
That would be awesome, actually. I'd love to
It
have him
would
on.
be interesting.
He'd never do it. He did it with me one time because I used to host a podcast, but I didn't want to do a normal podcast where you talk to snake breeders. I wanted to do like a more science-based thing where you talk to mostly academics and stuff. And I learned very quickly that academics don't care about doing your stupid reptile podcast. So you just got to be very to have a podcast that's successful and has a large listener base. You have to constantly be putting stuff out in a reliable interval of time. Whatever that is, you have to be dependable. You know, it's like in some of the best ones, it's like it's going to be out on Tuesday. And it might not even be good, but God damn it, it's going to be there on Tuesday. And you can set your calendar because that consistency builds an audience. Maybe not every show's the best, but you're always there. But it's there and then it's gone for a month. It's like you can't, there's no reliability. It's hard to build and retain an audience. And so it just got to be very difficult to get the kind of guests I want. And then I started producing more snakes, so I quit doing it. But I actually did an interview with Paul. And he only did it because it was me. And I've tried to get him to do it since. And I know these guys, they will never do it. Like, I know Casey Lasnick's a personal friend of mine too. He will never do it. Like I go herping with him once in a while. He ain't gonna do a podcast. It's like these old guys that just they're not interested in doing it.
Will you ever release those episodes?
I don't know. I don't have the files of the one I did with Paul because that was my old Herp Nation podcast. So I think Scott might still have the files. I don't actually have the files. That was a good handful of years ago and a couple computers ago. And I don't have the files for that.
How about the ones? I think you were doing the same thing with Lucas as well, right? Didn't you start one up recently with Lucas and that hasn't launched either?
Like 7 episodes and no one will ever hear.
Oh, come on. You got to release those. Why don't you just toss them to like NPR and post them?
The problem is this. It's like, had a plan. This is what I'm going to do. And so we recorded. And there was a couple technical issues we didn't realize until after. Like, there's a feature in that it's supposed to like go to like active speaker. So it's like whoever's talking is on the screen. It's supposed to automatically toggle back and forth. And it was not set up right. So that didn't work. It was like, which led to some visual problems in a couple of them. And then I brought my friend on who is to produce things. He's way more tech savvy. He's produced my old show and did a real good job with that. And then it was, we wanted to change everything and we can't do this. We got to do this other way. And it just became like this never ending moving the goalpost. Nothing was ever good enough until eventually it's like, I'm like 7 episodes in, haven't aired anything. And there's no, it's like, I just threw in the towel and quit. I'm like, I'm not even going to do this. Have an awesome interview with Dr. Dale DiNardo and all his research on egg respiration in children's pythons and maternal incubation in children's pythons. Talk to him. I have a really good one with Vin Russo because I've known Vin for a million years. We're old and stuff, but it's basically just talking about like, what's it like to, and when I interviewed Paul many years earlier, it was similar. It was like, because most people that breed and keep as a hobby, they have all mostly at least indulged in the daydream of quitting the job that they hate and just breeding animals for a living because that's what they really like to do. That's a normal thing. If this is your passion and your job sucks, you want to do your passion for a living. And I would have been able to do that. And so has Paul and Vin and some other people. And so it was a lot about that. Like, how did you turn your passion into a successful career? And how have you managed to keep doing that for decades over the long haul? So it's conversations like that. But yeah, I don't know what'll ever happen with any of that. Probably nothing. It's like they're not recorded the same way. It's like it's such a total waste. And I'm like, I can't keep doing this if we're going to move the goalpost every week. We're moving the goalpost again. And then what you did last week can't be used. Now we got to do this other thing. It's like it became like that. And it just, I don't know. I want to do a podcast, maybe not a podcast because there's a lot of the podcast space. Well, you guys are in it. There's a lot of competition in the podcast space. I want to do something in the media that is different from what other people are doing. And I'm kind of like, I keep thinking like, well, there's video. But then I'm like, I'm those guys got like a face for radio, so to speak. Like I don't want to look at my ugly ass for 45 minutes or half hour, whatever the set up the thing is. And I don't want to do stupid videos. If you look at like Reptile YouTube, it's 90% stupid. And with the occasional nugget of good stuff, it's mostly terrible. It's mostly look at me, look at me, look at my animal. Don't you wish you were me? Look at what I'm
Clickbait.
like. Don't you want to be like me? Look at me. It's a bunch of shameless self-promotion and shallow surface level bullshit. I have no interest in doing that. I want to do something educational, like something like learn something. Maybe there's a graph or a chart. But if you watch for 15 minutes, you'll know something you didn't know. Because if you don't learn anything, what was the point of it all? I don't listen to Reptile podcasts. I don't watch Reptile. If it's clear I'm not going to learn, if I'm not going to be smarter for having invested whatever increment of my time, why would I do that? It's like I want to learn something. If I already know everything you're talking about, why am I listening to it? It's like I want to learn something. I want to do that kind of stuff. And there's so many of these, quasi sort of academic sort of topics and even functional stuff in the hobby. Like, uh, even like I thought about doing tutorials on video. It's like, here's how you cut eggs. Here's why you might want to consider cutting your eggs and how you do that responsibly, not like a complete jackass. Turns out you don't take a freaking straight razor and saw the entire top of the egg off of your retic eggs like a certain somebody, then scoop the baby out with a fucking spoon. These people that do this shit, they're the same kids that ripped the paper off and peeked at their presents before Christmas. It's like, fun fact, if you cut the top of the egg off 3 days early, it doesn't make a damn difference what's in the egg. It's still the same thing. That was decided months ago. It's like, you're causing stress. You're cutting through blood vessels in all likelihood. You're increasing the likelihood it's going to leave the egg and drop its yolk. Why? Because you can't wait to unwrap your fucking presents a couple more days? Like, I cut all my eggs, generally speaking. I cut like carpet eggs on like 53, 54 days. I incubate a little bit cooler than most people. They usually take like 56 days. So a couple days before they typically hatch, I'll go in there with cuticle scissors, make a little pinch. I'll snip, and then I'll pull up and slice, just push the blade through so I don't nick any blood vessels. I'll make about a 1-inch top dead center slice across the top. I do not pry it open. I don't play peekaboo to see what's inside. It will be obvious when it hatches. But you will lose baby, as you guys know, and have probably lost babies. The egg tooth sometimes breaks off before, especially if you have eggs that are on top of other eggs. Sometimes you have an egg on the bottom you can't even see. It has no way to get out, and it'll die in a lot of cases. So I'll tear eggs apart in the later stages to make sure everybody has a clear trajectory straight up. I'll make that little slit. I'll put it back in. They'll come out when they're ready. I don't do any of that. This will 100% increase your hatch rate and survival rate of your babies. But I'm not spooning out the babies, my retics, to see what morph I hatched. Who cares? It's going to be the same in 2 days. But you might fuck your snake up. That's irresponsible. This kind of stuff. Like, I don't know. I'll find
You'd
something.
probably have a good amount of people that would listen to, but nothing compared to if you did like a pet tuber or you did some fucking stupid things like getting bitten by retics or things like that, right? Which is
I don't
what.
like to get bit by a retic. That sounds horrifying. Like I've got 4 pairs of retics.
How's your competition going with Ryan? You still tailing behind him on the amount of pythons you're breeding?
Yeah, well, I didn't know we were having a competition until he was
you
significantly
knew.
far ahead of me before it became apparent. Wait a fucking minute, I think we're competing here. Like, he also had a head start. There's some easy species. He's bred a lot of very difficult species, but he's bred a bunch of easy ones that I've just never liked. I don't like short-tail pythons. I don't like them. I have no interest in them. They're big, hissy things that they don't shit, they don't shit, they don't shit, and they don't shit for a month and a half. Then they shit the size of a bull elephant and piss 2 quarts of fluid, flood their entire cage, and stain themselves with their own urine. They're gross. I don't like them. Like I don't like them. I don't want to keep them. You can't get them out on a hook because they don't even have a tail, really. I'm not a fan. So he bred the shit out of all the short tails. So that's 3 easy, 1, 2, 3. I got to go through and do those. I don't even like them. Like, ugh. Like it's like. And he's bred all 4 chondro species, which I like chondros, but I don't like the chondro sort of community mentality. The all hybrids all the time. All that matters is my designer fucking bullshit that I have no interest at all in. Like, less than interest. You could take the greatest designer chondro ever, and I wouldn't even, to me, it's not even worth putting a single mouse into. You can fucking keep it. I wouldn't take it for nothing. That's my level of interest is negative. Zero. Once you do that, everything that was cool about a Biot chondro or an Aru chondro, you destroyed. Everything that made it special and unique, evolving in isolation to be different species in these different island ecosystems and looking different, you destroy that when you make your designer, which is just the fancy way of saying hybrid. And so I just got sick of the community's mindset on that, so I just quit breeding the snakes, which is probably stupid. But so I've only bred one species of chondro. So, but I got the hardest one. I got to breed the other three easier ones. Easier to get anyway. I need to do that, but I don't want to. I quit breeding because I don't want. If I hatch them, I'll have to sell the babies to those people. I don't want to deal. I just might banging my head into the wall. I don't want to deal with it. So, but I probably will have to.
Yeah, that's a community we're slowly getting into. We're still trying to import and only get pure, but never dealt with imports yet, and they've been a pain in the ass to get. Man, it's not going as well as I can. But
all the
one day,
talk about imports is really a lot of misinformation because those are the same people that want to sell you some high priced mud.
Yeah, they want to sell the hybrids.
A lot of like farm hatched, which are often wild caught young animals. Like most of them do pretty well. It's like they're not too bad. But the sad state of affairs, like if I wanted chondros, I would have to start with the wild caught ones because all the capture bred ones are all hybrids, and I'm not even remotely interested in doing that. You get a wild caught one, you know it's not a hybrid. It kind of has to be a full speed of the pure thing, doesn't it?
Yeah. So do you think that this problem is just as bad as like in the retics, where if we're not careful, we're going to lose some of these species? Like you talk about retic,
in that we're still allowed to import new blood. The retics are a nightmare because they ruin the gene pool and can't get more animals.
Gotcha.
So we'll put it this way: there are 4 species of retic. 4. People think, well, there's only 1 and 2 subspecies. Yeah, those subspecies were never. They're species, and there's a 4th one. Oddly, the one that is not described is the one that's most genetically distinct. So there are 4 species. And you would think when you have an import ban and you can never get another retic into the country ever again, that you would like think, maybe we should preserve some of these rare species of retics, but fuck no. Let's make 88% Calatoa albino horseshit. Let's just do that until we can't get anything. Because why the fuck would we have take any ounce of responsibility or accountability for our actions? Why would we want to do that? I have 1.1 of each retics. They are pure, no morphs, because of course they're not. But it took me 6 years and $10,000. 6 years and $10,000 to get one pair of wild type of each of the species of retics that are pure. That's an insane thing. And it was damn difficult. One of the hardest ones to find, reticulatus. A pure reticulatus that doesn't have, because they're all morphs, and they all have some percentage of dwarf blood, which means a different fucking snake. Because a dwarf retic is not a retic. It is a different species of snake that is related to a retic. Thus, they're all high. Find a morph retic that doesn't have some percentage of dwarf blood. It's maddening. I'm not even into retics. I just want to breed them all once.
Breed it, let it go.
I let them. I let the parrots go. I sold my rock pythons after I bred them, and I actually kind of liked them, but you can't have that many big snakes.
No.
And do them justice anyway.
So other question, going a little bit somewhere else. So recently, I found something pretty interesting in my collection, which was I feel kind of stupid. So I had this albino pop out, and whatever. Just it was while I was trying to do a bit more of the mixed projects, which I don't really do anymore. And it was dirty. It had poop on itself and whatever, so I left it. Anyway, it shed. Nothing about it. Again, later, another couple of months, I'm like, oh shit, it's dirty again. I'll wait till it's next shed. Anyway, a year goes by, and I'm like, it's still dirty. And I couldn't figure out. Then I keep looking at it, and I'm like, you know what? It just shed, and this isn't poop on it. Like, it's not just dirty. It didn't just wipe itself. It's got these black scales scattered a little bit here, a little bit there, and all that. So my question going on there is, now I'm pretty sure I've got a paradox or I've got a chimera. These two things are something that I hear being kind of interchangeable when they're not, and I don't quite understand what they are and how you determine which you have. I'd love
Paradox
to understand.
paradox is not really a scientific term; that's a hobby term, but would apply to either of the two conditions.
Okay, go for it.
But you have two types of ways you can, two broadly speaking, and then there's some subsets there. But the where you get an animal that has two different phenotypes expressed, and one is a chimera, and that is where you have an animal with two different genotypes that came from two different zygotes. You have literally two different animals fused together. And it doesn't have to be like two complete embryos fused roughly 50-50. You can have a little bit of genetic contribution from another embryo that isn't, in a minor sense. That's possible also. And the other is a genetic mosaic. So you have a chimera and a mosaic. A mosaic is also an animal that has two different genotypes, but in a mosaic, both genotypes arose from one embryo. And there's a few ways that can happen. Everybody thinks that they're all chimeras, and that the really extreme ones probably often are. But a mosaic can happen. Sometimes you can have what's called a monosomy. Okay, now you're supposed to have down your whole genome, and I'm probably butchering these terms and my explanation. I'm sure I'll get corrected by one of my friends. I have a curious number of friends that are geneticists, and I have like 4 geneticist friends, and so I might get screw some of this up. But everybody should be familiar. You have 2 copies of every gene, one inherited from your mother, one inherited from your father, and they're no different. So you have 2 alleles, one from each parent at each locus. So on the genome, that's how it's supposed to be. But it doesn't always go that way. Sometimes you can have extra copies. You can have 3 alleles. There'll be an extra one that isn't supposed to be there, and that causes what it causes. Sometimes you can have a missing allele, a null allele, an allele that doesn't come across during recombination from the other parent. So you have mom's allele and then a null, just no gene at all from the father. That can happen. And it's my understanding, it's not usually a situation where it's like one allele that's neatly clipped out like with a pair of scissors. It's usually like a chunk of information that is missing from one parent. But and this speaks to what causes an albino. What causes an albino is not having 2 copies of the albino mutation. It's the absence of any normally functioning copy. The albino copy is broken. It can't synthesize melanin, okay? What makes the animal a visual albino is not having 2 copies of that gene. It's because the animal doesn't have any normally functioning copies of that gene to make the melanin. It's got 2 bad copies and it can't do its job. So if you have a null, let's say mom's an albino, a visual, and dad is not an albino. He's not even a het. He's just a wild type. Mom passes. She can only pass along her albino copy that doesn't work right. Dad's gene is just fucking missing. It's gone. It's a null. It's not there at all. The animal will be an albino because because you still have, but it doesn't have 2 copies of the albino gene, but that doesn't matter. It's still 1 copy of the albino gene, and nothing at all is still no functioning copies of that gene to make the melanin. Ergo, you visually manifest as an albino. You are heterozygous for albinism, but you are visually albino. And the crazy part is that null can be inherited. You bred the albino that was missing a gene. It's going to pass on half of his offspring are going to get the albino gene. The other half are going to get the null.
And is that a mosaic or a chimera?
It can get to be a mosaic because it doesn't happen necessarily around the whole body. You can have if you're missing stuff, that's a monosomy. You can have what's called a mosaic monosomy, meaning like in seemingly random spots, a gene is missing. Like it's like, well, fuck that, and that can result in that sort of minor paradoxy sort of thing, where, you follow me? So,
I'm following. I'm following. I'm still trying to understand the difference between both.
Like imagine if you had an animal that is a het albino. It's got 1 albino gene and 1 fully functioning copy. It's a het albino, but if it has the mosaic monosomy condition where at random little sprinkles around, little bits scattered all around, the normal functioning copy from the non-albino parent is missing, but the albino copy from the parent that would have made it a het on 90% of his body is present, it will display albinism in these little fragmented areas. Those are the areas where it's missing the genetic information that would have properly produced synthesized melanin. So that's a very butchered explanation of a mosaic.
And as a general rule, though, if you have an animal that would be either mosaic or chimera, if you breed it back, is it more depending on if the sexual chromosomes are where that is that where the determination is going to determine whether it's going to produce as an albino or as a normal, for example, in your example?
Uh, let's say like a chimera, which all that matters and the only thing that matters is the gonads, testicles of the ovaries. What is the genetic situation going on with those? That's going to dictate the offspring. If chimeras are more complicated because they're not all even, half of them are not even going to be able to reproduce because they can only reproduce if both embryos that fuse together early on in that, like, 3 or 4 cellular divisions, little tiny clumps together. Basically, you have like in your oviduct, you've got like this little clump of cells right here and a zygote here, and nobody's shelled, and there's no one right here. And if they're a little bit too close together, and it's like 2 cells, 4 cells, 8 cells, 12 cells, and they touch, and they kind of just like absorb into each other, and then it continues to divide as one offspring with 2 different genotypes scattered around. And that's basically the super simplified way of how that happens. But those embryos are not necessarily of the same sex. A male embryo is just as likely to fuse with a female embryo. It's a proximity thing. So half of chimeras are going to be intersexed. That's going to be a male and a female embryo that fuse, and they're not going to be breeding nothing because you might have well-developed testicles down there, but this part of your brain that's sending out your hormones is from a female embryo, and the wires are totally crossed, and you end up with a dud. If both embryos that fused are of the same sex, they can absolutely reproduce. They will reproduce as one or the other. I've done this in my own collection. I produced a paradox super zebra. I produced it was a zebra clutch. There was an animal that was roughly half zebra or half super zebra and half not super zebra. It was very difficult to tell if it was zebra or a normal, and it had normally appearing hemipenes. It was just a bastard of a snake, just the meanest fucking snake you ever saw. But it's like right down the middle of its head. One side was patternless, one side had pattern. It was split right down the middle. It was evil looking animal. So I kept it, and I'd take it around to reptile expos, and it was it was a jerk, but it was an interesting conversation piece. And I bred it. I thought, well, let's see if you can breed. So I bred it to a virgin female super zebra, because if it was both embryos were fused, there was truly a male, because both embryos that were fused were male. If I bred it to a virgin super zebra, I could figure out what it was breeding as, because if it was breeding as a super zebra, it'd be all super zebras. And if it's breeding as a zebra, I'd get half super zebras and half zebras. And if it's breeding as a normal, I'd get all zebras. Well, it bred as a normal. It did breed. I got 11 eggs, and I hatched 10 zebras and a normal. How did the female super zebra produce a non-zebra? Androgenesis. So I produced an androgen, which is rare as rock, which is even way rarer than the chimera. So I had an asexual reproduction event where the female's genes aren't present. Meaning my super zebra female bred, ovulated, laid an egg, and was completely unrelated to the contents of the egg. It was only the male genes. It's the male analog of parthenogenesis. It's way rare. And they don't do very well. And this one did not. Wouldn't eat, got real weak, finally decided, I'm going to eat today, and then it died the next day. Like babies tend to do. When they have to redirect that blood flow away from their organs and stuff to their gut to digest, the heart just stopped. But I hatched a normal from that. So, yeah, I had an anomaly from an anomaly. But, yeah, I've got another one I'm going to breed maybe this season if I can remember to put in a few more rats in them. I have an albino, head albino. Well, it was from a head albino to head albino, and it's probably 30% albino, but its head is completely albino. and then just kind of like it's like a white-headed python. It's got an albino head, and then it's like just it disintegrates just as sprinkles as it goes further back the body. It's all front-loaded on the front half of it. So
And I'm guessing you want to just breed it to see what it is, right? Just
I've got
curiosity.
so many albino. I've
Yeah.
got a couple albino Darwin female. I have 3 female albino Darwins. I only breed about a third of my collection, maybe a quarter in a given year. Well, case in point, like I would flood the entire U.S. market. 328 million people, I could single-handedly flood the Brettles python market. Why? Because I have 18 adult female Brettles that could all lay 20 plus eggs. 18 of them. Could you imagine if I bred all of them? And I'd get 90% of them lay. What the hell would I breed this year? I bred 3. I tried 4 because 1 is a hard case. I can't get the male to do anything. I tried for 4, figured that I would get 3, got 3. That's enough. 3 or 4 clutches of them a year. So in a given year, I breed less. I breed about 20% of my female Brettles pythons in any given year. I've got some that have been sitting here I haven't put a female with and a male with in a decade. They're fine. But I've got 3 albino females, and I never would breed all 3 of them in a given year anyway. So I'll put them with 1, see what happens. Just because I'm curious. It has hemipenes. I don't know, but you still got, just because it has hemipenes doesn't mean that it can breed that both embryos are male. That's just, that portion of its anatomy was from a male embryo. That's all that means. Don't even know.
So then you're thinking that an animal that is more patchy and that has a large amount of both genotypes would most likely be chimera. An animal that is mainly one animal would be most likely mosaic. Is that the way I'm thinking? Just
probably.
Okay, so like if mine is like 99% albino, and I'd say maybe 1% of the speckling is not albino, then it's most likely a mosaic.
Yes. What you find is that the minor paradox animals almost always can reproduce. And they almost always reproduce as what their dominant phenotype would suggest.
Okay, and when you say paradox is obviously the wrong term that herpers love. Sorry, go ahead.
They're never going to give it up, but it should refer to both of these conditions.
Okay, I got it.
Chimeras are a real crapshoot, whether or not they can breed, and if they can, what they're going to breed as. Flip a coin. It's basically flip a coin twice. Flip a coin if they can breed at all, because they're both of the same sex, and then flip a coin as to which phenotype they're going to reproduce as. I do have a 95% paradox that breeds as the 5%. Unfortunately, it killed me, and then it produced a bunch of other anomalies. I made true hypo het exanthics 6 years ago. And I had a heat wave accident that killed a bunch of snakes, and I lost the 2 other males. I had a male that was amazing. I had a male that was probably like 30% paradoxy looking. I had a male that was like 5% paradoxy looking. Well, the heat wave, it got to 111 degrees here, and it lasted for a month. We had almost a month over 100 degrees, and it was just like, it was a catastrophe. A lot of snakes. I lost a bunch of snakes in one room because you can't, I mean, I'm almost in Canada. Like, I don't have central air conditioning in my snake room. You need a little bit of air conditioning for a month. There's never this August that goes on where the average temperature is like 97 degrees for an entire month, and it got up to 111, and it's overwhelming the system. So I had some tragedy there and lost the 2 other males, the best one and the worst one. I'm left with the one that's the 95% hypo, 5%. It just had some black flecking, which hypos can have, but there was a lot of asymmetry with it, which made me think it was kind of a paradox animal. I bred it last year in 2024 to 3 females. I tried to breed the year before and it wouldn't breed, and it just turned on and bred like gangbusters last year. I bred it to its 2 sisters, which were also hypo het exanthics, and also to a possible het exanthic that you can totally tell if they're het exanthic, because exanthic isn't actually exanthic, and it's not recessive. So everything anybody ever told you about exanthics was a lie. None of it's true. It's not exanthic, and it's not recessive. It's incomplete dominant hypoxanthism. And you can take that to the bank, because that's what it is. I don't give a shit. Like, that's the truth. And there's no such thing as anarthristic snakes, because for the same reasons. That's not a thing that exists. So all you boa guys with your anery boas, you have exanthic boas. But they're not exanthic boas. They're hypoxanthic boas, and it's incomplete dominant. It doesn't matter if you believe it. It's what it is. Because you can't be missing a pigment you don't actually have. Because snakes don't really have true red pigment. They don't have fully differentiated red and yellow pigment. Which
Yeah,
is why, do you have xanthic poplin carpets at all?
we do. Yeah, yeah.
You ever notice, like, well, poplin carpets are super bright red babies. Then
Yeah.
by that logic, the xanthics should be, what color should the xanthics be? They should be bright red babies still. Because you took the yellow out, not the red. But they're silver. I wonder why. Because red and yellow are the same fucking thing. Red and yellow in snakes are a continuum of one thing. Imagine a spectrum. It starts at yellow and ends in red. And everything in between that, that's one thing. They're not fully differentiated things. You can't separate one. You ever notice that all the snakes all around the world, doesn't matter what it is, there's always an albino and either an anery or an xanthic, but there's 0 snakes that have an albino, an anery, and an xanthic? Isn't that funny? Like, people have been breeding corn snakes for 60 fucking years and no one's ever found an xanthic corn snake. Isn't that amazing? There's like 7 or 8 types of albino, tons of aneries, but no one's ever found the xanthic, even though xanthism is the most common mutation. It's way more common than albinism because there's only one gene you can break to make a T-negative albino. You have to break the same gene. That's the one place you break it right at the base, and that's why they can't make you melanin. That's why you can breed an albino cow king to an albino corn snake, and all your hybrids are albino. Because there's only one gene it can possibly be. But there's like 4 or 5 genes you can break to end up with some sort of xanthic. Which means if the odds of a random mutation occurring that disables any of these genes, let's say it's 1 in 10,000. I see it quoted as being 1 in 10,000. If it's 1 in 10,000 for a random albino mutation to spontaneously pop out, it's 1 in 10,000 for an xanthic mutation to pop out, to randomly occur. But since there's 5 genes you can break to make an xanthic, that means it's 5 times more likely, isn't it? It means it's 1 in 2,000 for an xanthic mutation because there's 5 different genes. So it's a multiplier of 5. Yet no one's ever found that xanthic corn snake in all these years. Isn't that funny? It's because they keep calling them aneries. It's the same damn thing. That's why there's no... Think of anybody listening. Tell me the snake that has an albino, an anery, and an xanthic. I'll wait because there isn't. Because they're the same thing. So, and it's never recessive. It's always in complete dominant. Look at your het xanthic poplin carpets. They look a little different, don't they? Even as maybe it knocks the red back.
Yeah, I've had some xanthic, actually het xanthic IJs, and sorry, I'm saying IJs, Papuans, and I've had some hets that were more silver and looked more like an xanthic than an actual xanthic, and only by breeding it did you prove out that, holy shit, this is an xanthic, this one's a het, this one's not. So, 100% agree.
Yeah, no, it's the same with the coastals and all the rest of it. And it's the same with ball pythons. It's the same with boas. It's the same with any of those things. It's that it's hypoxanthism because you never see an albino that gets more black pigment when it gets older. You're just an albino. No black pigment means no black pigment. Xanthic means no yellow pigment. None. Not none now, but you can have some later. It means none. 0. Not now, not ever. So what we call an xanthic is a hypoxanthic, and it's about a 20-25% reduction in yellow pigment, yellow/red pigment production when they're born, and then about an 80% in the heterozygous form, rather. So the hets are maybe 20-25% reduced over baseline, and the quote-unquote visuals, the homozygous animals, are about an 80% reduction. But it's not a complete elimination even as a homozygous animal. It looks super gray, but there's layers of pigment on top of each other, which is why when you make a snow, it always looks like shit as an adult. It's like, where'd all that yellow come from? It was underneath the black. It looks super xanthic looking until you strip the black away, and then you see what was underneath it. Oh, that remainder of 20% black of yellow that's still left when there's no other pigment is really obvious. If there's other pigment, it becomes, it's still pretty gray. It looks pretty xanthic looking. But when you strip that away, it's there. Same thing with a snow boa. You ever seen an adult snow boa? It's like, where'd all this yellow come from? It's like, it was always underneath there. So that's why that's not true and it's kind of a myth. I get off on a tangent. I apologize. I do this all the time. I start talking about xanthic and hypoxanthism and all this sort of stuff.
Oh, that's why we bring you on, man. That's the shit we love.
But,
I love it.
It amazes me that people are so obsessed with morphs and they don't understand that much about them, how they work, what causes this. Like, it's why, and the interplay of that. Because if you understand at a fundamental level how morphs work, you can predict outcomes and make better choices about what to pair if you're into morphs. I mean, if I had to choose between morphs and wild types, it would take me 5 milliseconds to say wild types. But I do this for a living, so I don't have to. I've got everything. But and morphs are fun to dink around with. But if you're trying to make pairings and making multi-gene snakes, you can reliably predict certain outcomes. If you understand how these things work, you can predict how they're likely to work together. And in every morph, there's also analogous mutations that occur in other species. Are you familiar with batik blood pythons? The batik morph?
Not at all into blood, so that one
No.
I would say no. But I've just heard that most of the blood python morphs are just like a crapshoot. You never know what you actually have, or
Most of
they.
it's polygenic stuff that
Yeah, that's what I
defies
heard.
rational explanation. Batik is not. It's a zebra. It's identical. It is not similar to the zebra gene. It is the zebra gene that independently popped out in short-tail python.
Same tail
For
problems.
normal short-tail python, which has light and dark elements, it takes the batik. What it does is the heterozygous animal. It takes the normal pattern and makes it super busy pattern. Sound familiar? And then you breed two of the super busy pattern batiks together, and the homozygous animal is patternless. And it's not patternless dark, it's patternless, but it's the light pattern elements. It's that becomes the dominant color, and it's completely patternless and has a fucked up tail tip. It's the same thing. A spider ball python is not similar to a jaguar carpet. It fucking is a jaguar carpet. It's identical. They're both light-colored, pale ventral surface, pale-eyed, reduced dorsal pattern, incomplete dominant genes with neurological impairment, and a dead white homozygous form that's white with a thumbprint smudge on the top of his head, and his lung doesn't develop. That's because it's the same thing. The black-eyed Lucy thing you see in ball pythons occurs in like 8 species. There's a retic version of it. There's a fucking boa constrictor version of it. There's an Amazon tree boa version of it. It's like over and over and over again, you see the same thing. It's like the hets are like a kind of a half-ass hypo-looking thing, and your homozygous animals are a dark-eyed white snake that develops black and yellow speckles. There's a children's python version of it in Australia. They call it a marble. It's the same thing. It's all the same thing. These gene snakes are all. I mean, we are 99.8% identical to chimpanzees. All the difference is this fraction of a percent makes all the difference. Fun fact: you're also 78% identical to a grain of rice. True. I
I
mean,
love that.
so to be an animal, you're more closely related you are to rice. To be a vertebrate with a backbone, you're more closely related you are to the other animals. They're invertebrates, to a squid or something. It's like, so these pythons are actually really close together. Their genomes are very similar to each other. So it's likely you will see the same sorts of mutations occur in different species. It's like that jaguar thing has popped out in retics. It's popped out in carpets. It's popped out in ball pythons. It's popped out in African fat-tailed geckos. Oh, wobbly, reduced pattern, incomplete dominant gene with a dead white superform. Like, it's like you see that a lot. Like, it's like you shouldn't be surprised by these things. So once again, I've gone off on a whole tangent on how morphs work.
So you're saying that every white, every white snake will have that neuro, pretty much, or they?
No, it just seems to be one type. There's different ways you can make it. Like, well, if you look at just in ball pythons, and I'm not into ball pythons anymore, but most people have some familiarity because it's just, you can't not be. It's always getting hammered in the face with ball pythons all the time.
Yeah.
You've got multiple types of dark-eyed white snake ball pythons. You have 3 different complexes of genes. You've got the black-eyed leucistic genes. There's about a dozen of them now that make a perfectly healthy white snake with dark eyes that has some sprinkling of color on it in a lot of cases. You've got the yellow belly version of that, which is you have animals that are varying degrees of white, but there'll be some other traces of pigment, and there's a bunch of those that are all related and all are compatible. And then you've got a third kind. You've got there's 4 actually. You've got the blue-eyed leucistic genes, your Lessers, Mojaves, all that kind of stuff. They're all compatible. They all make some form of white snake with varying degrees of how white they are and how much pattern is retained, and they're all compatible. And then you got the force complex of them, which is the dead white snake genes. And there's like 4 or 5 of those. They all make a dead white snake when you breed them to each other, and any combination of them makes a dead white snake. and that's that homozygous lethal form. But that homozygous lethal form has also popped up in numerous other species of boas and pythons, and that's not surprising at all. There's a ton of it. I wrote a blog. I used to have a blog years ago, and I wrote it on different examples of analogous mutations where same identical mutation independently pops out in different lineages, and there's a ton of examples of that. So
Very cool. So, going off on something else, you've been talking a lot about proving out morphs and all that. I've heard you on a couple of other podcasts where you go a bit on a rant about how frustrating it is that nobody does it, nobody wants to put the time into it, and all that. And one of those prime examples would be like diamond pythons, the reduced pattern diamond, right? That one's still not been proved out. I think
yeah,
everybody keeps
I'm probably the least popular guy who keeps diamond pythons with the diamond python community, but like I think it's just fucking embarrassing at this point.
it.
Honestly,
It really is. So I'd love using that as an example. If you decided we want to prove it out, how would we do it?
You gotta the best thing you could do. You're not going to do it by breeding random ass unknown animals to each other or animals from the same bloodline because you can't. If it's a single gene, you have to eliminate that possibility. So you need an animal that is not related to your reduced pattern animal in any conceivable way, realistically. Breeding it to its clutchmate tells you fucking nothing. Breeding it to another one that looks like it tells you nothing. Breeding it to animals without ancestry tells you nothing. It doesn't. You need to know what the background on your animals is. And I get it, man. Diamond pythons take a little bit longer, 5 years or more to mature. You shouldn't rush. Well, you can, but it's a terrible idea. It takes a little more patience, a little longer to maturity. They don't breed as often. But that damn thing has been around for over a quarter of a fucking century. You telling me no one can figure it out, or is even particularly close? I mean, I keep hearing, these people are working on it. It's like, well, they should have been working faster because this is ridiculous at this point. I don't think people. I think people. It's just much easier to do one breeding, make your best guess, and sell the babies like you know what's going on, because that's like to jump right to the finish line and making that money. And that's what everybody does anymore. No one wants to take the time. Like, hypobrettles have existed for, Jesus, 40, 30, over 30 years, probably 35, pushing 40 years in one permutation or other. And in the US, had to figure out how it was actually inherited. That's fucking shameful. Because it wasn't like I'm the only one that had them. Ever and ever and ever, these things have been around, and nobody bothered to figure it out. Why? Because it's hard. They all just, it's codom. Again, nothing is codom because codominance isn't even a form of inheritance. Codominance, for the record, anybody using codom, stop doing that. It sounds silly. It's incomplete dominance. Codominance doesn't describe a mode of inheritance for a gene. It describes a relationship between genes, i.e., gene A and gene B can be codominant in their relationship to each other. That is not describing how either A or B is inherited. So the genes you call codominant are incomplete dominance. That's the mode of inheritance. So, it's codom, this kind of stuff. It's not. It's unfortunately really complicated. It is polygenic, but also not. And the hypobrettles, I had to do an outcross pairing, kept all 14 babies for 7 years till they were adults, tracked their color progression for 7 damn years. Then bred those animals together, the 50% hypo outcross animals together, and I kept their babies. I kept 2 clutches of them for 2 years, like 32 snakes. I kept them for 2 years, so they're all subadults. And by doing that, you start to tell the tale and you can figure out what's going on. In that case, it turns out that it's a polygenic trait, but to a certain extent. People think a polygenic trait, it's got 10 genes involved and they're all doing 10%. It's never like that. In this case, it's about 4 genes that make a hypobrettles, and 1 gene is doing half of the job. 1 gene. So there's a core single gene hypo that's doing about half of the work, and the other 3 genes kind of globbed on there do the rest of it. And the balance of all that makes a full hypobrettles. But since in that case you have 2 types of black pigment, you have 2 types of pigment in all these things. You have the go through an ontogenic color change. In black, you have the base layer of black pigment that the animal hatches with. Okay? And that is governed by genes. And then you've got a second round of black pigment distribution that comes in later when the animal goes through its color change. And that's governed by different genes than the base layer is. So what happens is, this is why hypos can get dark pigment later. This is why xanthics, which we already established are not really truly xanthic, how they can brown out. But you can't brown out unless you have yellow pigment. Where is that yellow coming? It's because there's a second wave of yellow pigment distribution that happens later in age that wasn't suppressed by the original mutation. So in the case of the quote-unquote xanthics and in the hypobretals, what you have is a gene that silences the base layer of black pigment or yellow pigment, yellow/red pigment in the xanthics when they hatch. And so they hatch out and look very hypo or very xanthic. But as they get older and they go through their color change, that second round of pigment distribution, which in Bredl's pythons, the second round of yellow is what makes them turn brick red. And the second round of black in a Bredl's python is what gives them the increasing amount of dark pigment around the bands on their tail. But that second round of black pigment distribution in the Bredl's python is governed by a different set of genes than the base layer was. So you have a single gene hypo that knocks out and really boogers up your ability to make that base layer, but doesn't do shit to that second round of distribution that happens, and they gain more dark pigment later. So the full hypo package is you have that base gene that's doing half the work that silences that base layer, so you hatch out hypo, and the other genes don't do their job until later, and it suppresses the second round of pigment distribution, and the combination of both ends up an animal that starts with very little black and ends with very little black. But there's no xanthics like that. The xanthics, it silences the base layer of yellow pigment, yellow/red pigment, so your anery boa people, which are just xanthics, or your xanthic ball python or carpet python or whatever. But later on, when those animals, when they start getting 3-4 feet long, they start getting closer to maturity, and that second wave of yellow pigment, yellow/red pigment distribution happens, it's unimpeded, and thereby they brown out, and they don't, and that's why your snow starts out super white and then gets a surprising amount of yellow. A hatchling snow is super white, but you watch it, where's this yellow coming from? It wasn't there at the beginning. It's because it's a secondary wave that the gene didn't actually suppress. That second wave of yellow pigment distribution is why your jungle carpets turn yellow. It's that second wave of yellow. They don't hatch with it. It comes out later. And that's why do your jungle carpets get the dreaded black tipping and smudging? Where does that come from? The second round of black pigment distribution that makes the rings on a Bredl's tail come in. That's the crud that comes in your yellow on a jungle carpet. It's why you can never get completely rid of it. It is a natural and normal part of the color change. It's the end point of the color change process. That's why you can never totally eradicate it. You get the occasional animals that stay super clean for a super long time, maybe even for their whole lives, but they're an anomaly because their babies don't do that. Because if you could eliminate it entirely, we would have done that 25 years ago and they would all be perfect as adults, but they almost never are because you can never get rid of it because it's the natural end of the color change process, is that second release of black pigment with age. Albinos don't gain dark pigment with age because that's a different type of mutation. Mutations in morphs and snakes can be divided roughly, I always say, in like pigment distribution mutations and pigment synthesis mutations. Pigment synthesis mutations, like on a T-negative albino, you are just breaking the snake, you're breaking its ability to even make black pigment at all. So it can never make it, and when it's time to release more later, it still can't do it because it just can't even you broke the machine that makes it. These xanthic type mutations and these hypomutations, what they're doing is you're breaking the distribution of it. You are not really totally disabling the machinery that makes the pigment. You are fucking up the distribution network that delivers the pigment. And so they can still make it, and that's why you can make it, they still can make it, and that second wave goes out, and you get a little bit later in life. So, there you go.
I love it. I just love how you go into tangents. It's like you ask one question, it goes completely to the right, completely to the left.
Horrible. That's why I'm on these things for too long, usually.
It's all good. If you've got a little bit more time, we'll stay a little bit more, but we'll probably have to cut it around 2.5 hours, give or take. Are you still good with that?
Cool. I got to eat. It's 7 o'clock here now. I got to eat.
Okay, so we'll go a little bit more. Shan, you got any questions?
More focused.
Can you go on about tumors or cancer in snakes? I see a lot of that lately.
this is an area where I try to do what I can do. There are a few health problems you see with carpet pythons fairly frequently. And it's not that you don't see them with other things, and I don't even know that they're more common with carpet pythons. My sample size is so biased. Like I have, at this very moment, I have 42 different species of python. 42 species, including 5 that haven't even been described by science yet. I have a lot of snakes. But carpets are a huge portion of that. So I have like 300 odd adult pythons. But more than half, probably 60% of them are some form of carpet python. So any sort of ailment, my sample size is so skewed that it makes it seem like it's more common because I just have, well, obviously, if you have 160 adult carpets, you're going to see some shit in carpets. Whereas if you only have, I have 1 pair of adult Angolan pythons, it's like you're not, is it more common in the carpets than Angolans? My sample size is so biased that it makes it hard to know. But those 2 things are cancer and pericardial effusion, which is not an enlarged heart. It's actually an inflammation of your heart, and their heart sits in a sac full of fluid. That's your pericardial sac, and that fluid cushions your heart from friction while it's beating. And you can get a buildup of too much fluid in that fluid-filled sac, gets too much fluid in it, and it looks like a swollen heart. It's not actually the heart, it's the fluid buildup. This happens in your dog. This happens in people, and there's treatments for your dog. And you go to the hospital, if it's got you, they'll fix you right up. There ain't no treatments for snakes. Why does this happen? Why do I see it in carpets seemingly more frequently? And by frequently, I mean once every couple of years with a huge collection. But I think that it might be 2 things. A bias that I have so many carpets. If you hatch 200 of something a year and you've got 180 adults, it's like you're going to see that. And also they're so slender, especially when they're young. I think being slender, I think it makes it more obvious. Like if you had a minor case of pericardial effusion in a short-tailed python, would you even know? It's a kielbasa sausage of a snake. Would you actually know? It's so thick, I think you might not notice. But in a slender baby carpet, I think it might be more noticeable. But it's a thing. And it's not an awesome outcome. It doesn't necessarily kill them. I went to New Guinea in March, and I had a female die, a super zebra, that developed it at 1 year old. So I just kept her. And she was 8 years old. She lived for 7 years like that. And then I don't know what the hell happened. I actually had a male in there. She laid a clutch last year, the year before, and I had a male in there, and the male was just still sitting there chilling, and she had died. I assume maybe that had something to do with it, but it wasn't like a death sentence. She lived for 7 more years and then died of unknown causes while I was out of the country. So, but that's the thing. And there's no treatments. So, I mean, I try to figure out this stuff. I have friends that are veterinarians and vet techs and have access to this stuff. With the cancer, I see that. That's the #1 cause of death in my collection. I'm getting, you both have probably seen it. And without asking you, and full disclosure to anybody listening, I have not discussed this with either of you beforehand, but I'm going to go out on a limb and guess, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm going to guess the animals that got the cancer were males, and they were young adult males. Were they young adult males by any chance? Between maybe 400 and 800 grams coming into their prime?
So I've definitely had that, but I put one down actually last week, and it was an adult female. But I would say definitely, generally speaking, yes, I would agree with you.
I don't know why. I actually also put one down, an ivory no less, an ivory zebra.
I put down a German jungle.
But I would say when I see it, it's 90+% males rather. And it's never old males and never big males. It is young males between like 2 and 5 years old and maybe 450 and 800 grams. Basically, just coming into their prime. And what it would amount to, I mean, I don't know that I should look into this. I don't know that, like, what causes sexual maturity in humans, i.e. puberty, is in males, is you have a large ramping up of testosterone production, which then initiates secondary sexual characteristics, and you become a sexually mature man. When that you get those influx of hormones that cause these physiological changes, allow you to reproduce. I don't know that snakes and pythons have testosterone, but I'd be quite surprised if they don't have some analogous hormone that signals for males to become mature. There's probably something. It may not be testosterone as we know it. There's going to be something that does that. And I don't think it's a coincidence personally, and this is just me spitballing and informed speculation, I guess. So no one should take it as gospel. But I think that the fact that it is overwhelmingly males that are just hitting their reproductive prime and coming into sexual maturity, when that hormone, whatever it is, would be ramped up into peak production, and then they get the cancer. And I've got 20-year-old male carpets that are never going to get a tumor. They're fine. I've got some old ass males. It seems like once they get past 6, 7, 8 years old, even if they don't get any bigger, it doesn't ever happen. Because what happens once you achieve that ramping up stage in humans, your testosterone level when you're 13, 14 ramps up through the stratosphere. And then what happens? It levels out. And I have 2 teenage sons. One's 18 and one's 16. And what happened when they're both 13? They turn into complete assholes. Why? Because of testosterone. It's ramped up. They hadn't figured out how to come to terms with that. They were fucking with their emotions and everything. Well, what happens is they get to be like 16, 17. They mellow the hell out because their body is adapted to the higher permanent level, and things calm fucking down. These snakes seem to be getting this cancer overwhelmingly when that is in that ramp up phase, or just maybe starting to crest the top of the mountain, and not when they've been at that level and adults for 10 years. It's never then. I've never had a 10-year-old snake get it. I've never had any 10-year-old snake get a tumor, not even a female. But
Agreed.
I've maybe had 4 or 5 females, and I've been doing it for 30 years, that got an obvious tumor. It's males. I cannot even tell you how many males, 2.5 years old. Yeah, I get to breed you. I had an Xanthic, the only one in the States, Xanthic Super Caramel. I'm like, sweet, he's ready to go. Put him in finally gets a slot in the adult room. Didn't even get to pair him once, and all of a sudden, there's the tumor. It's like, are you kidding me? He's like a 2.5-year-old, 700 gram, perfect. Done. Never even got to pair him. It's always something like that. So I think it's probably there's a hormonal component to it. There might well be multifactorial where there's other things. But I had an irreplaceable, fully striped Brisbane coastal, super red with a complete tiger dorsal stripe. Awesome. And I had bred him and made some striped females that were not as striped as him, and I wanted to breed him back to his daughters to make striped Brisbanes, and then I never got the chance to because he got the tumor. And at that point, we were doing the second edition of the book, the snake was very much alive with a fist-sized tumor. It was only going to end one way. He couldn't pass a meal, so I gave it to my friend. I said, you're not going to save this snake. I don't want you to surgically intervene and try to save him. It's fucking as good as dead. He doesn't know it yet. There's nothing you're going to do. This is only going to end one way. I want you to take him back alive. When you get him to work and everything, I want you to euthanize him. And I want a complete pathology, necropsy. I want a workup. I want to know exactly what the hell this is. That's obviously cancer. I want to know what kind and complete pathology. And I put the pictures are in the book and it did all that. It's the same because I've opened up ones that have died before myself. It's the same thing. And it is always the same thing. It's gastric carcinoma, basically stomach cancer. It's gastric carcinoma. That particular one also had bacterial granulomas kind of attached to it. But it's gastric carcinoma. So when you see it, it's stomach cancer.
Have you ever noticed that, for me anyway, I've seen it probably about 6 or 7 times now with my collection, and it's always near about the last 3 inches of the tail. Like, it tends to be like before the cleoca. Does that make sense? So not really the tail, but it's in the back end.
I've seen it further back. I've seen it further up, but it seems to always be a little further back than where a meal would be.
Yeah.
Like, it's like past the halfway point where a meal would sit. It's always past that with some wiggle room, but it's in that section. And I don't know why. I know I found out what it is. I don't know what else I can do. I don't know how to, figure out why. There's about 1 million reasons why. I mean, you could have genetic causes. There are viral cancers and other things. I tend to think it's not a virus, but you could see where you might have like genetic predispositions in some lineages towards this. I don't know that I've ever seen it in a Brettles python or an inland carpet python, I don't have a lot of diamonds, so that's almost, I have it, but I don't have so many that would, I see it in the coastal stuff, and I see it in jungles, but jungles and are the same thing taxonomically and genetically anyway. I see it in those guys, the vast majority of it in those guys. I don't know, have I even seen it in a Papuan carpet? It's in that same group. When you guys have seen it, was it in that jungle, generic coastal jungle-y kind of stuff?
Only
so
those.
I've had zebra, and remember Helsinki, Dominic? We paired him up, and he had it at one point. We were breeding him, and all of a sudden he got it, young male, and we actually put him in there, and he bred that. I we got eggs, so
Oh, I've
it
done
was
that before, where it's like, I know this is your last hurrah. Get in there,
right,
man.
right, right.
Like, I can't ever even feed you again. It's like I feel bad. I don't like having to euthanize animals. I mean, we're all animal lovers, so that's like
I hate
literally
doing that.
Yeah,
part of
they
this job. But
That's
it's
that sucks.
you can't work with animals. You will have to cross that bridge at some point. It's unavoidable. You work with animals, and stuff goes wrong.
they
I mean, I
stop
tell people,
eating
like, oh,
completely.
I had a couple adults die this year, and they think, oh my god, like that's weird. It's like I got a snake building with 300 adult pythons in it. If I had a big building with 300 humans in it, do you really think you'd have three of all ages, from old ones to young ones, and you had 300 people in a gymnasium, let's say, for an entire year? Do you really think you're going to have 300 alive at the end of a year? Fuck no. You're going to lose one or two at the other end. That's normal stuff. It's like you can't. We should be surprised they live as long as they do, and they are as disease resistant as they are. It's like if you have 300 snakes in your collection, like, and somebody got a sniffle of 1 year, it's like, is that a big deal? Could you imagine if you had 300 humans in a gymnasium sized room and you kept them there for a year? Do you think you're gonna get the whole year and nobody's gonna get a sniffle? Are you kidding me? Somebody will be dead. Everybody will get sick. Everyone will have had a sniffle at some point in a year. When was the last time you went an entire calendar year without catching even a minor cold? I have an immune system like a freaking crocodile or a shark. Like I am
So
basically.
as soon as I get anything, I start taking like a Colafex or anything, and I start. I'm old. I gotta take care of that stuff, man.
I am the least sickly person I know. I never get sick, but I will get sick once a year. And even with
That's
this
about right.
ridiculously strong immune system, and it's every time. Everybody else gets sick. Everybody in the house gets sick. Not me. I'm the one who never gets sick. Like I'm the one who had like asymptomatic COVID like 3 times. Doesn't do anything to me. Or I went once, and that was the sum total of it. But I will get a cold once a year, about once a year. It's like why would you be surprised that your animals would get sick? You should be surprised that they're so unlikely to get sick in the grand scheme of things. Like they're way hardier than we are in terms of that stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Going.
Cancer carcinoma, and I don't know, and I think there might be a hormonal component to it to explain the age and sex bias. But I do not know. I wish I did. I don't. Is it? You speculate, is it something they're putting in dog food or rodent food, some sort of additive or something in the feed that you're feeding your rodents that they can't clear out of the system and it builds up, and for some reason males can't tolerate it and they croak? Totally possible.
So I breed my own rats, so that's where I've taken that out, I guess.
Feed they're using, if it's something they're putting in the food that you feed your rats.
So it's master feed. I mean, that's like it's rodent food. It's not. It's a Canadian company.
The problem would be like it would take like to really figure that out. The experiment would require raising hundreds of snakes for a century through generations, because to gather enough useful data, it's like, because you're trying to. It's not like, okay, half of all snakes get a tumor. It's like, well, it's not. It's way lower than that. It's like 1 in 100 snakes gets the tumor. 1 in 75. It's like you don't know which one. It's like if you knew that half of these snakes are going to get tumors, you could have a control group. If it was way more common, you could have a control group where you're feeding rodents are eating this food, and the other rodents are eating this other food, and you could figure it out in 20 years or something. Because you have to raise things past that like 6 or 8 year mark. You could probably do it. But if it's 1 in 75, how could you? It's already an unlikely thing. We see it as often as we do because we have a shitload of snakes. I don't know how many snakes you guys got, but I bet it's a lot. Like it's a lot of them. So you see it more.
Yeah, it's enough to notice it.
You know what? I've never seen a baby carpet, a yearling carpet with a freaking tumor. Not once in all these years. And I probably produce 7,000 or 8,000 carpet pythons. I've never seen a little carpet with a tumor. It's always that hitting sexual maturity. And if it's a female, it's hitting sexual maturity or been sexually mature. It's like a mature adult. It's always a breeding size animal that it happens in. It's never in a juvenile. I've never seen it in a juvenile.
Yeah, I had an older female coastal.
What?
I had an older female coastal that had she eventually got a cancer or a tumor in the bottom half there.
You know, if it's a 20-year-old snake, why would you be surprised? What's the number one killer of humans? Cancer. Like we have dinosaur fossils that show pathology cancer. I have I have a curio cabinet. I collect Pleistocene megafauna fossils. I have Gomphotherium and Mastodon and mammoth bones and shit. I collect all that stuff. And I have one thing. It's a big coastal carpet's neck that has bone cancer. It's all the bones are fused together. It had a bone cancer, and I have a preserved section of it. It wasn't my snake. The guy I get fossils from had it. Somebody gave it to him, and he preserved it. And so you would not. It was a big ass old snake, so you wouldn't be surprised that like an older animal would get some type of cancer and take him out. It's this young animals in their prime that it's like that's the problem. Honestly, I wouldn't say I wouldn't mind, but if I got a 20-year-old snake that gets cancer, it's like, yeah, you had a good run. You're 20 years old. You probably made a bunch of babies. That's not as tragic, It's like this, but this happening to so many young males. I don't know. I don't know. I'd love to find out. I don't know. I don't know what more I can do that I've already done, which is identifying exactly what the pathology is. But if someone could suggest a reasonable experiment that might shed light on it, I'm the kind of guy that would spend 10 years chasing some bullshit down like that. If you could figure out an experiment that could be concluded in a decade, I'm game for that. I'll split 10 years into figuring it out. I'm not going to be doing this in 10 years anyway. But I can't figure out an experimental sort of protocol that would be informative. But if someone else smarter than me has got an idea, I'm happy to entertain doing it. But because it's something going on. I can't believe that in the wild, carpet pythons are just dropping dead of cancer randomly. There's got to be something else going on, a co-mitigating factor that's like doing this. And it could be, since you see it primarily in that northern coastal jungle group that are all genetically one biological unit, what if it is a genetic factor? Our gene pool is by necessity very small. So what if there is a gene that is not necessarily causes cancer, but makes you highly susceptible. It makes you highly predisposed towards gastric cancer. But it doesn't always do it. And it's just rife throughout all these things. And how would you know? It's possible to identify those genes, but it would be very difficult. I need to just talk to Warren about it. He brought that up as a possibility. I'm like, well, I don't know how I convince him to find it, because it's like, there's kind of a lot of genes. You might have noticed that. It would be difficult to just these guys that do genetic testing to figure out where morphs are for morph testing. It's because they already know the zip code. You didn't need to find where the albino ball python gene is. You didn't have to start from scratch. We already know where the albino gene is in other things. And though that doesn't give you the precise address on the genome, it gives you the zip code. You know where to look. It's going to be around here somewhere. And you have some idea. Something like a cancer predisposition gene would be really difficult to probably find if you had no idea where to look. But I don't know. I'd like to figure that out.
Yeah. So I'll ask one other, maybe hit one more topic, and this one might be a little controversial, but I really want your opinion on it.
Specialty.
There you go. Well, might be, might not be. So I want to go down the Serpento virus, so the nidovirus.
Oh, man.
And I know, and everybody's got slightly, like, some people look at it as like the boogeyman, horrible things. Other people don't. I'm of the belief that I think that about 90% of all collections have it. Whether people want to say it or not, or people are hiding it, or all that kind of stuff, I truly believe that it's almost everywhere. Everybody has it, and most of the animals tend to just live asymptomatic the majority of the life and all that. So I wanted to kind of get your train of thought on what you think of it. And I'm not asking you anything specifically about you. I want to know your belief, your thoughts on it.
Like it is. I'm going to drop the truth bomb.
Go for it. I want it.
Here it is. You're all freaking out for no fucking reason at all. If your snake has a virus, you should hope and pray and thank your lucky stars it's Serpento virus, because it isn't shit. That's the fucking truth of it. It's been around for literally millions of years. If you think you're getting rid of something that is endemic for millions of years, you are delusional. It was always in your collection. It always in your collection. It will always be in your collection. 30 years ago, it was in your collection. 30 years in the future, it's in your collection. Why? For the following reasons. It's just one of these things that everybody misinterprets everything. when new information of anything comes out, it's kind of like the fog of war sort of thing. When you first news reports of something comes out, they are almost always wrong. Then when you learn more, it's never what you thought it was initially. What did everybody think initially? That there's this new virus that's super contagious and kills all your snakes, and fucking none of that is even remotely true. It is the oldest thing on earth. There is a nidovirus for literally about everything. There are related viruses in humans. There's like 6 of them, and you never even heard of any of them, except one of them that caused a bunch of diarrhea on a cruise ship about 8 years ago. They don't even have fucking names, the human ones. They get serial numbers because they're no big deal. These are viruses that evolve. Viruses evolve with their host. Basically, and this helps that I have like a co-author I write books with who is a virologist, so I have a bit of an advantage there. But basically, it's kind of imagine like your cell. A virus gets into a cell, it uses its key, opens the lock, opens a cell, hijacks a cell's machinery to make more copies of itself, makes more virus spreads. Okay? The bigger the virus is, the more species specific it becomes. Small viruses have like a skeleton key. They can get into a lot more shit. Bigger viruses is often indicative of something that's been evolving with its preferred host for longer and longer and longer. And it turns out these are fucking enormous viruses. They're enormous. There's one of them that affects right whales. Just right whales. Doesn't affect other whales, just right whales. It's basically species specific. There has never been a python or boa. There's never been a snake you don't find this in. If you test for it, you find it in everything. Even healthy snakes. It's like people now, they start randomly testing snakes and they find all this stuff. I know a guy, he is a veterinarian in Europe, and what did he do? He got a wild-caught scrub python right out of the bag from Indonesia. Still got the Indonesian newspaper. Took it to work, ran PCR on it. It's nido positive. We didn't know there was a nido virus in scrub pythons. But there's a bunch of species of those, so you probably have dozens of different nidoviruses in different species, all keyed into their specific host. Animals still happy and healthy and fine. Who cares? What people need to get over this idea that this new boogeyman virus is going to get into your collection and kill all your snakes is utter nonsense. What happens is it's endemic in everything, and it just rarely ever causes a problem. 99% of these things go their whole lives. It never causes an illness. And if you have something that 99% of the time, it's everywhere. You can't get rid of it. And it almost never causes a problem. Why are you worrying about that? Who fucking cares? What you should worry about is your snake healthy or not? Not whether it has an asymptomatic virus. Here's a fun fact for anybody listening to this and all of us on this. We are all right now simultaneously, and everybody listening is infected with multiple viruses right fucking now. They're just not making you sick. So who cares? Are you worried about the viruses that you are actively infected with, everybody listening and us, that isn't doing a damn thing to you? No. You only care, it only matters if it makes you sick. So why are we worrying about this? And I get like, oh, he's just saying that because he's got nidovirus. That's nonsense. I don't test anything for nidovirus. No animal I've ever sold anybody has ever tested positive for nidovirus to my knowledge. But I'm not a fucking idiot. Mathematically, I have a million freaking snakes. What am I going to be, the one guy that has this magically immune collection? I don't have any sick snakes. But I can't imagine that if I started testing every single snake that I would get nothing but negative results. I'm not an idiot. I assume that it's there. I assume that. But it's like, I don't have evidence of that. But I'm not, other than just the mathematical evidence, there's no way. There's no way that it's in every collection ever and it just skipped over my giant-ass collection of snakes. There's no way. So, we all do, and we all always did. The snakes you had 20 years ago, guess what they had? Yeah, you guessed it. And you didn't know. And who cared? And didn't diminish your collection or your hobby in any way. So what the fuck is different? Absolutely nothing is different. That's it. Now you have a name and an irrational fear of something. It's like, it's not new. It's not hyper contagious. It's not super deadly. None of that stuff is true. It's the people that really started the panic are Cody and Pia Bartolini down in Florida. And I know Cody and Pia, and they're really nice people. I consider Cody a friend. But they kind of jump the gun, and you'd kind of admit that, like, because initially you don't know what you're dealing with. Oh my God, you've isolated this virus that seems to be causing problems, and then everything spirals out of control. But what you look at the data is that about 1 in 10 samples that they test comes back positive from a healthy snake, meaning 10% of all the healthy snakes are testing positive, which means that well more than 10% of all the snakes are positive. Because all a positive result does, or a negative result in the PCR test is it tells you, did this snake shed enough virus on the day you pulled the sample to trip the test? It doesn't mean it doesn't have it. It doesn't mean it does have it. You could be positive and not shed enough virus, negative result. You could have it and not shed enough virus and get a negative result. It means you shed enough virus to test positive on that day, not the. Which is why you see people, I tested it like 4 times. And on the 4th time, it was positive. It's like, yeah, because the viral load is so low. That's why the fucking snake's healthy and it's fine. Why are we freaking out about this? It's ridiculous. I sit in this wall of snakes behind you is an absurd concession that I make to people's paranoia about a virus that is almost nearly inconsequential. Because there's no evidence that it passes through the egg membrane. I.e., if you don't maternally incubate your eggs, you incubate your eggs. Also, it can't survive outside of a host for more than about 2 days. So you pull your eggs, and you put them in an incubator. You could have a million nidos crawling all over your eggs. Doesn't fucking matter. Put them in your incubator in 2 days. Their genetic code will have degraded to the point where they're no longer capable of causing infection. Babies hatch, no nido. So I have a clean room that I'm sitting in that is just for 2024 babies. Nothing else. They go from my incubator room to this room. And then I have a yearling and holdback room and an adult room. And I keep everything isolated. I can go from this room to the yearling room to the adult room, no problem. I will not go backwards in time. Babies that just hatch can't possibly have anything because they've only been in this room and only me in here. And I won't even come in here. If I have to go from my adult room to this room for some reason, I will not come in this room unless I completely shower, disinfect my nasty ass, and change my clothes before I even come in here. And I have to do that, which is really fucking inconvenient. And why do I do it? So that other people can feel confident in buying a snake for me because they're irrational paranoia about a virus they don't understand. But I do it so people can have confidence in me. But that's why this is all behind me. It's an absurdity. It's like it's not that big of a deal, guys. I know, and I won't name names because that people tell me all sorts of things in confidence. I have a lot of friends in the carpet community who, when all the panic started, they all did the same thing. They sent in samples from 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever samples of random snakes from their collection. Not the whole thing because it'd be ridiculously expensive. But they sent random samples from all around the corners of their collection to get tested. And I only know of a single person that came back with no positive results. Every single one of them, except for one guy, had something that had been 10 years old, been fine this whole life. And they were fucking fine. I know of a guy that got a snake from another guy who I won't mention the guy he got it from because he was kind of YouTube famous. At any rate, snake came in with a persistent respiratory infection. Took a long time to get the snake healthy. Multiple rounds of different antibiotics. Eventually, snake got healthy. It was a Brettles python. He bred it to a Brettles python from me. He didn't get the Brettles python from me directly. It was an animal I produced way back in 2004. I only know because it was my only set of twins I've ever hatched in Brettles pythons, and I know that exact snake. He bought it probably third hand, more than a decade after it left my collection. And while he had eggs in the incubator, the snake recovered. The antibiotics cured it right up. Eventually, animal got healthy, was fine, bred animal snake for me. He tested the parents while the eggs were in the incubator, and the female that had had a troubled health history was nido positive. Fun fact, the male that I produced was nido negative. Even though I'd been banging this snake for years at that point, was negative. The snake lived, went on, produced like 3 or 4 clutches or whatever. All the babies were negative. The male never got sick. Nobody ever got sick again. And the female died of lung cancer, of all things, as an older animal. So people assume that oh, snake has nido, snake gets RI causes nido. And that is stupid. You can quite easily have COVID and influenza at the same time, can't you? You can have more than one thing wrong with you. The assumption that any RI is caused by this underlying virus is not something you can take to the bank. Why did the snake in that analogy get better with antibiotics, which don't affect viruses? Also, there's some research that you might be able to cure nido just by cooking the snake. So that's another thing. That I
I
I
went
know
through.
people have done this. Friends of mine have done this with good success, and then subsequent negative tests. It's like at this point, if you can cure this by baking your snake for 2 weeks at 95 degrees or whatever, which does stress the hell out of them, without even any drugs, and you can clear it, this is not a big deal. If 99% of the time it never causes illness, this is not a big deal. This is the most overblown fucking thing ever, and it's just infuriating. The number of questions I get, the number of like people freaking out. It's like this is not a big deal. It's not, and it never was. It's just like we have too little information, and they extrapolate too much off too little information. And in the fullness of time, when you have more information, you can paint a better picture. It's like, this really isn't that big of a deal. People that had a bunch of animals get sick, if you ask them about it, there's always two things you'll always find in those Nido horror stories. One is that usually the body count is exaggerated in the sense that what people were doing, and probably still do, is this snake's died. And then any snake that got a respiratory infection or died in the previous 5 years, they retroactively, with no evidence at all, attribute that to the Nido. You don't know why that happened. You can get a fungal respiratory infection. You can get a whole lot of bacterial. You don't know why. You need to limit this to the ones you tested and knew that they had it at least. And even if they had it, it doesn't mean that was what was causing it. Let's say you get stuff that can respond to antibiotics with a virus, because it wasn't the virus. They had an asymptomatic virus and a bacterial respiratory infection that got cleared because of antibiotics, which has happened numerous times also. Freaking out about stuff. Are your snakes healthy? Quit fucking worrying about it. I'm worried about this stuff. Don't sell snakes that are outwardly not healthy. It's like wash your fucking hands. Take reasonable steps to prevent the transmission of disease. Having 3 rooms is a huge pain in my ass. But if a disease that's actually serious, like people think Nido's serious, it's not. Ophidian paramyxovirus is the stuff that is the real nightmare fuel. There's some stuff out there that people don't ever talk about that is like, oh, it's hyper contagious and airborne. It can kill any snake. It's the most like, and it's like just the most insane. It's like, if you get this in your collection, your only option is to, I don't know, burn your whole house to the fucking ground, move it to a different state, and change your name. I don't even know. There's some scary stuff. This ain't it. Serpentovirus isn't it. Take reasonable measures. Maintain good biosecurity. I don't go hopping around rooms. I'm very careful about doing that for that exact reason. But even though the serpentovirus thing is not that big of a deal, there are other viruses that I don't have to my knowledge, but they could be a bigger deal. Hell, even mites. If I got mites in my adult room, I don't want them in all my rooms. Maintaining good biosecurity between zones ensures that if a problem, whether it's a pathogen or a parasite like a mite or anything, stays in the one room. It doesn't go from room to room. It stays here. And the rest of you are all right. And the rest of things are all right. It's just good business. It's good animal husbandry and good management. But the serpentovirus, they need to put that to bed. This is like, find a new thing to be freaked out about. This does not warrant and never did warrant the freak out that it generated. So if you have more than 10 snakes, statistically, guess what you have? Just statistically. Shocker. Who cares? If everybody has more than, I don't even know anybody in this hobby. If you only have less than 10 snakes, are you even serious? Like, do you even know anybody with less than 10 snakes? Because I don't even think I do. Like, right? Like, we all have a shitload of snakes. So it's something we have to manage. Deal with. And I don't know. The last time I had a couple of snakes got a sniffle, I didn't test them. I don't know that it was Nido. It was Womas, actually. It wasn't even carpets. But there's Woma versions of this, too. And the Woma version isn't the same. It's a different version. And the carpet versions, there's different ones. Every condor has its own. Every species has its own. So it's not like there's not a nidovirus. There's nidoviruses, a lot of them, an insurmountable number of them. Like, we know about this many viruses that affect reptiles out of this many viruses that affect reptiles. There's no money in reptile virus research. We don't, even in humans, we know about this many. This is the percentage of viruses that affect humans that we know and have quantified out of this ocean of them. Viruses pick up bits of genetic material from their hosts, and they leave little bits of genetic material in their hosts, which is another fun fact. 5%, almost 5% of the human genome is viruses. You are literally made of viruses. So imagine a bunch of people that have a bunch of viruses not causing a problem in their collection, who are literally they themselves partly made out of viruses, freaking out about a virus that doesn't do much things. It's absurd. Calm down. It's just calm down. We're literally made of this stuff. So quit freaking out about it. Worry about if your snakes are healthy. Quarantine your snakes when you get new arrivals. That's good business. That's good practice. Do that. Do what you can do and don't worry about it. You can only do so much. Worrying about shit that's so far out of your control, you're just going to drive yourself crazy. It's like quarantine your stuff for a good long while. Observe it. Make sure everything it's like do the best you can. Don't go hopping around touching all your snakes with the same dirty ass hands. Work in zones. Be conscientious about how you work with your animals in general, and then hope for the best, because that's all you can do. Anybody that thinks you can do anything more than that is full of shit. They're deluding themselves. You can't. I love all the YouTube influencer reptile people. I don't know what it is that they all get the special issue black vinyl gloves, because always the black ones, because they want you to know they're wearing gloves while they're holding a snake. You ever put on black vinyl gloves to hold a snake? Do you? I mean, it's like, what the fuck is that for? Because unless you're changing gloves every single snake, what's the point of that? You just got cooties on your gloves as opposed to on your skin. I did the math, and I would go through, I think, 30 boxes of gloves a week. 30 boxes of gloves a week if I put on gloves between every single snake. Clearly, no one is doing that. Like, fucking nobody's doing that. So the gloves are clearly, it's theater.
Unless people are in the medical field, you don't know how to wear gloves. You don't understand the reason you're changing gloves and all that.
I know how to put them on and take them off right. When I wear gloves, I do it right. But I put gloves on. If I got to touch something that's truly disgusting, and at this point, it better be really bad before I even bother. I don't care. I'll put my hands on whatever. But sometimes I have might even have a stack of them sitting around here somewhere, just like pink square Post-it notes. As I'm going through a room, cleaning a room, if I hear a noise, you ever have a snake like they just look at you funny and think, is something wrong with you? And all it is you just got a feel that this snake's looking at me funny. It didn't wheeze. It didn't blow a bubble. It didn't do anything. It just looked at you with its head cocked. You're like, I got a feeling. Put a freaking pink Post-it note on it, and I come back to it. And then for a good long while, I go through the whole room, and then anybody that's got the pink Post-it note, I deal with them last, and I will glove up with gloves for that snake. And if there's two snakes, then I'll go through and I'll be very conscientious about those snakes. They get dealt with last after everybody else. And sometimes, I swear to God, it's mostly like, you're just looking at me. Your head's cocked. Just something, you just got a feeling. And I'll come back to you later just to be safe. And usually a couple weeks, you take the Post-it note off or whatever. But I'm like, but you're not changing gloves. And are you fucking kidding me? If you put hand sanitizer on your hand between every single snake, your skin would fall off before you got to the end of your snake room if you had that many snakes. You're not doing that. We're playing with a theater. It's the illusion of, it's like, you can only realistically do so much, and you should do what you can realistically do, but quit pretending you can do more than that, or that you have more control over things than you do, because you don't. You don't. That's like, none of us do.
So I found out that for me, I used to do the hand sanitizer thing, and my hands were disgusting after a while. And after like 3 or 4, like 5 or 6 snakes, you got to go wash your hands in real water because you've got all that gunk on your hand. But you know what I found that actually works really well is a bucket of 70% alcohol. I simply keep a bucket with about an inch of it, and you just dip your hand in, do this, and then I go from one cage to the other. And you know what? My hands are actually not destroyed after even cleaning 50 cages and cleaning my hands like that in between.
I've got gallons of 95% pure isopropyl alcohol for that purpose, and like a gallon jug with a big mouth on it for like tongs. it's just the easiest way for feeding tongs and things like that. You can just dunk it and it evaporates and flashes off in just a
Yep.
couple seconds.
So the reason I took 70 is because of Julander's actually episode when he
Yeah.
talked about the virology. He talked about how the 70% alcohol actually had a quicker time for killing the virus than the 95%, which I still don't understand the why, but he said it, so now everything's 70% instead. And the same thing to dip the
You're getting cheaper too, so it's like it
yeah
works. He would know. I mean, this
yeah
is
He's,
I would
he
hope.
said it's because he doesn't evaporate as quick, and it needs a 3 minute kind of like sit time. I don't know how to say that,
I thought
but
all the high percentage alcohol. I thought I had and this is me sharing too much. I thought there was a chance I had some sort of a outbreak of something a number of years back. It was probably, but it was we had that same heat wave where my building ran really, really, really way too hot. And when something's overheated for a day, even two, not a problem. A month of too hot, it really stresses things out, and you start having problems because at higher stress levels, their immune system becomes compromised because they're stressed, and they'll get sick just as effectively being way too hot and the inability to cool down than being too cold. And so I had a few snakes got sick. I had a couple snakes just drop dead, just rolled over and fucking died. And just to be on the safe side, I did not know that it wasn't a pathogen. I thought it was probably just the heat, but just to be on the safe side, it was a huge pain in my ass. Like every freaking tongs between every feeding, I would be like, dunk everything, flash off. It took a long time to go through feeding, and so my feeding hemostats, my hooks, everything, you're just like pop, 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 dunk it. It only takes seconds, but when you have a lot of snakes, I did that for a good month or so until the temperature dropped, it got back to normal, and the problems went away. But initially, it's better to act out of an abundance of caution when you don't know it's not something more serious. I always kind of figured it was probably what it ended up being, but I did not know that for sure, and it's my job. I can't take that chance. I gotta assume the worst until it proves to not be the worst. And it when the heat died down, it calmed down. But that was like the hottest. That was the hottest summer ever recorded, the hottest month ever recorded, the hottest week, and the hottest single day. It was just this whole, and they've been keeping records just since like 1880. So in almost a century and a half, that was the hottest stretch, the worst heat wave that's ever happened here, like ever. And it just was, the room ran an ambient air temperature of like 90 degrees around the clock. It never cooled off because it was just, you'd get to 99 in the day, 102 in the day, and it would cool off to like 88 at night. It was just never, it was just this unrelenting historical event. I think 28 humans died in the city I live in. The city was like giving like bottled water to all the homeless people because they were dropping dead in the streets of heat stroke. It was that bad. And so I lost several snakes in 2 rooms as a result of that. But I did not know exactly what was going on at first. So I went into full freak out, lock things down, and like until you know. But which is what anybody should do. If you think there's something going on, act like there's something going on until you know there isn't. Don't just keep selling snakes. Don't assume the best, assume the worst. Plan for the worst, hope for the best. And yeah. That's my philosophy on that, and that's the long and short of the serpentovirus.
I love it.
It's like, it'd be better if there was no such thing, I suppose, but it's not going away. It's like saying you're going to beat influenza or something. It's like you're not. It's endemic. Once a pathogen is an endemic in a population, that's what endemic means. It means you're never getting rid of it, like ever, ever, ever. It's always there. So why are you banging your head thinking you're going to be the one to beat it or something? You're fucking not. You're not. You're not. It's just not going to happen. So manage your expectations and manage your collection and do the best you can. It's all anybody can do for any of this stuff. Do the best you can and be conscientious, and the rest is not up to you.
Very nice. Listen, Nick, really, really appreciate all your time. I don't know, Shan, do you have a question or a really short one you need to ask before we go, or are you good?
When are we going to see a ivory super zebra?
I don't know. I didn't want to even try to make one until I got to really, really, really white zebras. So I originally said, well, I get to like 88% ivory blood zebras, but I'm there now and I have yearlings. So I wish they would eat rats better. I have 1.1 really, really awesome zebras that actually eat rats and like 7 more that don't. They eat fine, but they're pissing me off on the rat thing. So I might try it. Uh, I don't feed things that much. I don't power feed things. I'm not in a race. I should probably be more motivated in that department and get things up to size a bit faster, but I would be willing to bet that in 2 years' time, I'll probably try it. I don't know what to expect. My guess is like a super pale gray snake, probably, because super zebras always have that wash of melanin that makes them not yellow and makes them kind of olivey,
Yeah,
greenish,
xanthic.
gold. So I imagine that would
Yeah.
not be as white. I wish. Wouldn't that be awesome? Oh, it's a solid white jungle. Wouldn't that be awesome? But I bet it's going to have a wash of some pigment, maybe olivey green on a white. I mean, something probably, but it's probably time I tried. So it'll be the crop I'm raising up now
I like it.
that I can try it. So
Do you breed your own rats, by the way?
I do again now. I had my rat colony met with an unfortunate end. My air conditioning backfed into the room and fried my entire colony. I've been breeding the same rats for 28 years. They're just the same rats for this entire time. Like something will happen, you have a flood, you knocks back, but it's the same, the most ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah.
And it fried the entire room, like no survivors, not even a pinky. So
Oh,
I had
really?
to
Eh?
reboot about 8 weeks ago, and I'm producing rats again. I can't produce enough. I don't have the space to have a big enough rodent room to do all I need. So I still have to buy fuzzy and hopper mice, and I still have to buy large rats. I can make all the smalls and mediums I need. I can make all the pinky mice I need. I can't, but like I had to buy, because I lost my mice, I had a friend in Connecticut. It cost $1 million to send them to me because it's so far away, but he sent me 4,000 hoppers. 4,000. Michael, that'll last me for a minute, but it's like but I need so many of them. Like, if you have 200 or 300 carpet pythons, they all eat a fuzzy to a small hopper. You try to do that every 7 to 10 days, like you are burning through. You're burning through over 1,000. Even at every 10 days, I'm going through 1,000 fuzzies or hoppers a month.
It's so much work. Trust me. I've been doing it for years, and I've gotten it bigger now because I gotta help out with Dom and my collection, and it's a lot of work. The gassing to everything.
Yeah, people don't realize
it's
how much work the rodents
it's
are.
the worst job ever. Stay in school.
It sucks. And people don't realize, they think like, oh, it's way harder than the snakes, way more work. Like if you fuck off and don't feed your snakes one week, nothing happens.
Right?
If your rodents run out of water for a day, they eat all the babies' heads off. It's like if they run out of
you
food,
can't leave at all.
Yeah, with no food or water, you could leave your snakes for 2 weeks with no food and water. They'd all be alive, your pythons. You leave for 48 hours, no food and water, you'll have like that one Hannibal Lecter rat left that just survived by eating everybody else. And it happens so fast. Like, you can't just not, you have to be on it, or it falls apart so quickly. But yeah, I need more space to do more. I'd like to be entirely self-sufficient. But yeah, no, I'm like that worst. Like all the inconvenience of doing like 60% of your rodents, but none of the independence of doing all of it. Like it's like the worst of both worlds.
We do it all, but it's hard, man.
Yeah, I bet.
I like it for Dom will agree. It's all the little ASFs and all the baby mice you need, like for like the Antaresia, like pygmy pythons. Like I need those pinheads,
Oh yeah, I got those this year too. I like a dumbass. Well, I had a robust mouse colony, but when I chose my pairings for the year, so then I went and hatched 11 clutches of Antaresia, including Prothensis, and have 0 mice, like not a single living mouse. I have 12 tubs going now, and I get the occasional pinky. It's going to be a year before I'm back to. My 2026 babies might eat all right, but I have to get 100% of all of my 350 odd pythons this year feeding on frozen from the start. I do not have any access to live. It's 100% frozen, and it sucks. Sucks. Like, I've got, I think I still have over 100 non-eaters. Over 100 of them.
Ouch.
All those ones right back in there. Everything past that point is the wall of shame. Everything right behind me to this side are the ones that actually got with the program and eat frozen. But I'm like, I got to probably assist feed tomorrow night again, a bunch of these guys. And it sucks.
Brettles, have you had a hard time feeding them? I've gone 2 clutches, and I'm having so much trouble getting these to eat. Same thing with the inlands.
I'm going to give you, inlands are always harder because they are more lizard eaters because they're really small, so they're going to eat lizards. The bigger babies are more mammal oriented, and the smaller babies are. That's why diamonds and inlands are going to eat a higher percentage of lizards because there's no mammal they could ever eat. So the lizard preference is the problem. Try this, and this is a little macabre sounding, people. And just so anybody listen, just so you know, I am talking about frozen mice, not live ones, because I'm not a barbarian. Scalp them. Take your frozen thawed fuzzy or whatever, get it nice and warm and everything. It's ready to go to offer. And then pinch the skin on the top of its forehead and rip it off. Don't brain it. Just rip it off so you'll see the top of a bloody skull. I don't know why this works. I just learned this year. Because I had some Corrales Russian burger eye from Venezuela. A tree boa is so rare, most people don't even know it exists. And I had 2 litters of this most impossibly rare tree boa. And I was losing some of them, and I was having a hell of a time. I talked to a friend of mine who breeds a shitload of Amazon tree boas. And he goes, try this. And I'll be goddamned if all 6 of those little bastards did it on the first try right on my hand. I'm like, are you kidding me? I had tried braining them. No dice. Rip the skin off so you can see the top of the exposed skull and the bloody skull cap. And try that. I do not know why. Is the smell of blood? I don't know, but it works. It's the best trick ever. It won't get all of them going, but I'll bet you if you try it, you get a few of them going with it.
That's interesting. I've never heard that one.
Thanks,
I
Nick.
told him, get the fuck out of here. Why would that work if braining didn't work? Why would that work? I don't know. He said, just try it. I have no idea. It works. I don't understand. I don't even care because it works. So anybody listen? Try that.
Okay.
But I don't know why.
I love it.
Interesting.
Yep.
Cool. Well, I think we're going to come to an end because if not, you're probably not going to eat until tomorrow.
I know, right? I'm starving.
Listen, Nick,
anyway.
if anybody wants to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
I, fortunately, am the easiest guy in the world to get a hold of. I'll actually talk to you on the phone even because I'm old. I'll actually answer my phone and talk like a normal adult. My website is inlandreptile.com. It's super easy. And unlike most people, I actually have a website. Actually has my phone number on it and my email address and an availability page that's actually updated. I'm updating it right now. It's on my other monitor right now. Like, I update it every single day. Like, it's always current. I have a Facebook business page for Inland Reptile, and my name's Nick Mutton. I'm the easiest. I'm not hiding at all. I'm the easiest guy to find, the easiest guy to contact, and I'll actually get back to you. The only downside, I might chat your ear off. You won't have a hard time getting me on the phone. The hard part is getting me off of the phone because they just keep talking forever.
And that's why you're good.
That's okay.
You're good on podcasts. Shan, how do people get a hold of you?
I'm not good at time management, though.
Usually Facebook is my big thing, or you can message me on Messenger. I'm also on Instagram, just Shan Melanson. Also, Snake Frenzy is my kind of name for my business that hasn't. I'm not good enough to do a page yet, so I'm working on that slowly but surely.
Curiosity, what part of Canada are you guys in? You guys in the east?
So
Ontario, yeah. East
we're
Coast.
I'd say we're probably about the same latitude, give or take. Because if you look at where we're 5 hours from Toronto, which everybody knows, but that's pretty much like the same border as like all the major cities. Like maybe I think 95% of all Canadians live like within 100 kilometers of the United States, right? Because that's the warmest part of it.
I live 5 minutes from the United States. I can literally go across the bridge, Augsburg, New York. That's pretty much.
Americans are terrible at geography, and they think that Canada exists like in some frozen wasteland to the north, and don't realize that most of the people in Canada live further south than I am in Washington State because it dips down, and I'm way up here. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's like, yeah, the border
Yeah.
there around the lakes area and stuff. You're actually quite a bit like, what is it? It's like, isn't Toronto? It's like about the same latitude as like the California, Oregon border. It's like quite nice, really. It's not that far north at all. It's like considerably farther south than I am. It's yeah, ridiculous. Like,
Yeah, there's a whole section Maine and all that. Like Maine would be further north than us. Like certain parts of Maine and certain parts of but we're like our winters still suck. Like we're it's
Yeah.
starting to cool down now, just like it probably is starting to cool down for you too, right? So
just this week, it's now all of a sudden like, what the hell? Why is it 68 degrees Fahrenheit? What the hell? It was like 85 last week.
yeah, we're
So,
starting.
yeah.
We're getting there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well-
it's advantages if you breed snakes. You don't have to have a hard time cooling your Bredl's pythons enough or anything.
Definitely has its advantage.
Cold is easily achieved, at least.
Right.
All right, guys. Well, it's been great. I'm going to get out of here and go eat dinner.
So
Thanks,
before you log off, Nick, just wait. And I just want to make sure your buffering's off. So worst case, if you got to go, just leave it on. You probably can see on your top right, it's going to be written how much percentage is uploaded. It should move to 100 as soon as we log off, but just don't turn off after we do. Just give me about 30 seconds.
Okay,
So
99.
exactly, as soon as we log off, it'll finish it. So to everybody, a huge thank you for logging on. Nick, a million thank you. Your wealth of knowledge. You're
Thanks,
just
Nick.
entertaining to listen to. I love it. And Reptile Rejects for everybody. And for myself, the Mick Cabin on Facebook and a couple of other places. So again, thank you, everybody. And we'll see you next week.